We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to an edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And as has become tradition, I have Switch 2 updates for yet another week. No additional console pre-ordered, so I'm still planning on lining up on the Wednesday evening before the Thursday
like a teenager.
Launch. Yep, just a throwback to the good old days, is lining up for launches of video game consoles. But I do have a different update, which was that all along I had wanted to get one of the new GameCube wireless controllers. It's like the old GameCube style, but it works with the new Switch 2, since they're adding GameCube titles to the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. You have to do the Plus expansion pack version to get the GameCube games on the new Nintendo Switch 2. But yeah, they have the old classic GameCube controller, the purple color and everything, in wireless form if you want to do that. Now, the only place you can order those is through the official Nintendo online store, and you must be a Nintendo, whatever it is, Switch Online or whatever their subscription service is. You have to be a subscriber to that, which I already am. And then originally, it was going to be like they would only sell them as part of the pre-order invitation thing that they were doing with the Switch 2s, but like 2 days after they sent out the first wave of invitations, which I was not part of that group, unfortunately, they opened up the pre-orders for just that GameCube controller. If you wanted to order like one of the Switch 2 Pro controllers, or like an additional pair of Joy-Con 2 controllers, or like any of the other accessories for the Switch 2, that still says by invitation only. But for some reason, the GameCube controller alone was like opened up to everybody, and I missed like when it first opened up. I was actually at work when it opened up, so it wouldn't have happened anyway. But I missed that. I was like, darn it, I'm gonna have to like wait months for that thing. So anyway, I've just been periodically, checking in once in a while, not like any kind of scheduled thing or like habitually or anything like that. Just once in a while, I check the Nintendo store. I'm like, anything with those GameCube controllers. Well, Sunday morning, for some reason, like early in the morning over here on the West Coast, Sunday morning, I just happen to pop in and it's like, pre-order your GameCube controller now. It was there. It was like, the button was there instead of saying sold out the way it had this entire time. So I'm like, oh, all right, I'm already logged in. I clicked that button and I successfully pre-ordered a GameCube controller. Yeah. And then I went ahead and used my nephew's account to order a second one for him. So that's really sweet. I'm like, hooray. I should at some point have GameCube controllers.
If this whole GameCube controller thing that has not proven to you that the target audience for consoles has not changed
my age
in 30 years. I don't know what else will. I mean, It is the same people still. I mean, like whenever you hear people arguing or read or see people arguing over which console is the best or whether or not PC or console is the best, they have been having that same argument for 30 years.
That is going back to recess. Playground recess is where those arguments began. Now, my niece could not care less about getting a GameCube controller. She's not even super excited to be getting a Switch 2 because she actually cares more about the...
Has friends?
No, well, she does have friends, but she plays quite a bit of video games. But she cares more about like the design on the outside of the hardware itself. And she got one of the Legend of Zelda Switch 2 OLEDs, which I bought for her, of course. But like that was the thing that she got, and she cares more about the outward design, so she's not even super excited to get like just a plain black Switch 2. She's probably going to want, if they have future designs coming up later, years from now, that's what she's going to want more. So no GameCube controller for her. It would be wasted. But my nephew is like into retro gaming, so he's quite a Super Nintendo fan, an N64 fan, and even a GameCube fan. So he'll appreciate it, I think.
You hope. Or at least he'll tell you. At least, hopefully, he'll tell you that he appreciates it.
Sure.
Even if he
lip service.
Thinks it's
for Uncle Rob.
His weird uncle keeps buying him stuff,
That's
and he's
right.
like, "Oh my god, not another console."
Things are
This
so
is
much
weird
worse.
controller.
Oh, what a horrible thing to have to put up with.
So house updates. So I haven't done a house update in a while.
It's true.
Mostly because nothing's been happening. We've just been kind of sitting, waiting for things to happen.
Yeah.
So, and over the weekend, I have been mostly against my will forced to go to a bunch of parties. It's the end of the school year. There's graduation parties for kids in high school that are on my son's ish age, and so their families are having graduation parties, and then there was a couple of birthday parties, and then just some get-togethers that I ended up having to go to, and I didn't really want to, but whatever. It's just, I am not an introvert, but I am also not an extrovert.
Okay.
I am.
You're not seeking out the big gatherings,
and I don't mind going to these things, but many times I really kind of don't want to go to these things. Like once I get there, I'm fine, but getting me there is whatever.
So you're not a refuse to go, but you're not a the one to start up the big gathering.
Yes.
Okay.
So the real problem was when the first party we went to was like a 50th birthday party for kind of a friend of ours, and it was sort of outside in Florida, and I did not dress for outside in Florida. And by the time I left, I was like, we're going to have to cut these clothes off of me. I'm so sticky. I'm just moist.
That is possibly my worst nightmare is living in those conditions. I can't deal with heat and sticky
never
sweatiness.
come here. Rob will never visit me.
It is
Florida.
not my intention.
No chance. You should definitely not come like September, because you'll come from in September and think, oh, it'll be cooler, and it's not. It's not even a little bit cooler. I can understand
that. Yes.
Like August is just like ramping up. And so I ended up talking with a bunch of people over the weekend who are kind of in the same position that we've been in. And some of them in worse positions and some of them better, but kind of going through the same thing. A lot of people who flooded, a lot of people whose houses are kind of in limbo. I met one family who had basically bought a place 2 weeks before the hurricane.
Oh, no.
Signed a mortgage with the intention of selling their house soon, putting their house, moving everything over, then putting their house on the market, cleaning it up, putting their house on the market, and then selling their house and essentially paying off that mortgage.
Sure.
But then the house floods 2 weeks later with like 2 feet of water in it, and now it's in this weird limbo where they can't sell it, and they have already signed this mortgage. They've moved into this other place, and now they have to deal with that.
The old place flooded, or the new place flooded for them?
The old place flooded, so they can't sell it to pay off.
And it still had all their stuff in it?
Yes, mostly.
Yes. I mean, neither is good, but that's...
yeah. So there was a lot. So I've been back and forth. So as a quick reminder, we're trying to do everything. So the options are endless, but if we were to limit it to a small list, it would be sell the house. The house has been flooded. The drywall has been taken out up to like 3 feet or 4 feet or whatever it was. And the house has been remediated, so there's no mold anywhere or growing, I guess. And everything's open, so no mold can grow. And the house is mostly empty except for stuff we haven't moved out because we didn't want to, or that needs to be thrown away, or things we need to go through, or the majority of it is just the kitchen cabinets, which had to be taken off the wall, put on the ground, and then we should have thrown them away, but we weren't really sure what we were going to do with them. There's some remediation stuff, and they're all custom. I mean, it sounds really expensive, but at the time when we did this, the Lowe's price for cabinets was only, 20% less than this person that we found who did custom cabinetry and gave us exactly what we wanted. So for 20% more, we're like, ugh. I mean, why would I get something I don't want when I can just pay a little bit more money and get something I do? So we ended up just kind of leaving the cabinets there. And so that's what's in the house right now. So we can sell the house as is to somebody in theory. That's financially doesn't make sense.
Yeah, obviously at a loss for what you bought it for. Yeah,
obviously. And then, or we can split the lot, which would require us to do a lot of stuff, plus knock down the house and pull out some trees and spend a bunch of money on that in order to sell the lot separately. which we found out through the real estate agents that we've talked to that financially doesn't work either, because there's so many lots for sale and they're just not going for the price that you would expect them to go for previously, which of course makes sense.
Too much supply right now.
We have applied for a grant. It's called Elevate Florida, which this grant pays to have your house raised and then hurricane proofed. But it doesn't pay the whole thing. It pays like 75% or something like that.
Right.
And we've applied and they've accepted our application, but we're in line, and the line is long, and I don't really know. And we don't. It's a black box. We don't know what's going on over there.
Sure.
We just heard recently that the first round of approvals went out, and we were not part of that.
Okay.
So we were kind of waiting to see if Elevate Florida was going to go through, because if it did, then we could raise our house, and it would be hurricane safe at that point as far as flooding is concerned, and the windows would all get updated, and the roof and all these other things that would have to happen, and then we could move back in, and that would be great.
Oh, okay.
But well, I mean, not right away.
No. But I mean, it's just there'd be some kind of end point that you're aiming toward at that time.
Going towards, right? And then of course we've talked about other things, which are like, knock down the house, build a new house there, sell it, and then use that money to buy another house someplace else. Split the lots, build two houses, sell one, live in the other, or sell both and get a third. All of that stuff is like, I don't know how anybody, like, based on all of the talks. So if we talked with contractors, we've talked with architects, we've talked the price per square foot. Like, I don't know how anybody other than the people who are actually building the house are making any money in this state, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, you would spend an inordinate amount of money building the house and maybe sell it for 20% more than you did building it. So you don't end up with enough profit afterwards to justify the 18 months of cost. Not only the cost of building it, but how much profit you make is not enough. At least I don't know how these people are making any money. Anywho, so these are all the things that we're thinking of. And when the Elevate Florida grants went out and we did not get in on the first round, which was not surprising because of where we were in line, my wife decided we need to just start looking for a house. We're just going to start looking for a house. So this weekend we started shopping for houses, and that is the update basically.
Okay.
So we've gone from, essentially, it seems now that what we're going to have to do is just sit on this property for the remainder of the summer in this hurricane season. Hope nothing bad happens. Wait until hurricane season rolls around, and the hurricane season ends, and then see what the housing market does in the state of Florida.
So, like, could one possible option be, if that Elevate grant eventually comes through, you could do that and then sell the house, like, if you've already bought a new one, type of thing. So that could be a potential option. Okay, that
could be a potential option. Yeah, it's becoming increasingly obvious to me that my wife really loves that house and wants to move back in.
Okay.
And I didn't think that was the case. And I don't know that she thought that was the case either. She, the further we get away from having to throw all our stuff away and deal with the house, the more I think that she has that those memories have faded, and she's remembering all the good stuff.
Sure.
About living there in that neighborhood, and being able to cycle to work from where we lived, and all of this other stuff. And I think that she's getting very wishy. I don't say wishy-washy, but she's feeling herself drawn back to that house. So I think she was really staking a lot on the Elevate Florida.
Right.
And when that didn't come through, that was the breaking point where she said that she wanted to start looking for houses. There was what's called a ride of silence. Like, every year they do a ride of silence around here, and it's just a awareness thing where a lot of cyclists get together, and they bicyclists get together, and they wear signs, and they have, like, whatever, and it's to increase awareness of the number of people in the area and the country who have died from, while bicycling, essentially.
Oh, okay.
And when they did this ride, they rode partially through our neighborhood, and she kind of did the same route that she would do going to work.
Okay.
And she said she got really emotional because she was like, this is the last time I'm ever going to ride this, which of course doesn't have to be true, but that's the way she felt.
Yeah.
That it was the last time she was ever going to ride on those streets again. I'm like, okay. So, I'm not nearly as, connected to anything as she gets. And I'm not in any way saying that that's good or bad. It's just what it is.
Well, also, like you've mentioned that you've moved many times in your life, so there's a little bit of a training that's happened for you. You're sort of trained yourself over your lifespan.
Whenever there's interview somebody in a disaster area and they're like, "Oh, well, this is where I grew up. This is my home, and I can't leave it." I'm like, "You watch me, watch me leave it." I'm like, you wouldn't even interview me because I was already gone. I don't have that connection to places or things that most people do, and she doesn't really either. But I'm feeling like she is right now. So
it's not
we're
an unusual
see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So we're shopping for houses, and there may be a big move in our future. And that'll be exciting if it happens. If we find something that's right. Because the price, we still, it's not like we're overflowing with cash over here.
Right.
So we really need to sell this place so that we can afford someplace else. But we're going to try to float a bit of a mortgage to get us, even if we're in the red for a couple of years waiting to sell our property. We might have to do that. That might cause us to have to work longer or whatever, but that might be what we have to do to stay in this area. It's pretty stressful, I'm be honest with you, but it is at least we're doing something right now. So that's the update on the house. My son got a car towed yesterday for the first time, so that was exciting for him. He called me. He's like, "Dad, I got my car towed." I'm like, "Well, that sucks. That's going to cost."
Parking it somewhere it's not supposed to be, or from breakdownage?
From parking someplace it's not supposed to be. And that is a racket around here. It is an absolute racket. He parked out of the beach. He didn't see a sign that said no parking in a Walgreens parking lot. I'm like, there were signs in every other parking spot, but the one he parked in didn't have a sign directly in front of it, so he thought he somehow skirted the rules. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. So that was a fun learning lesson for my 19-year-old son.
That is bound to happen to everybody who drives a car on a regular basis. Yeah, that's a little rite of passage there. Probably not the last time either. Most of us have done it more than once.
So I will say yesterday was Memorial Day.
It was.
Here in the States. So this is Tuesday of that same week, and you will hear this on Thursday if you download it on the day of. And so yesterday in the middle of the day, I was doing some work, and my wife said, "You know what? You should go to the movies. Should take our 15-year-old son to the movies. Why don't you go see that new Marvel movie's out? You've been talking about it. You want to go see it? Go see the new Marvel movie with your son." I said, "Well, that's great. I will do that."
Okay.
And I started looking up the times and stuff, and then was like, "Well, there's one that starts in like 30 minutes. I don't think we can get there in time. But there's the next one's like a whatever time it was." And I was like, I'll buy a couple of tickets. I'll buy a couple of tickets.
All right.
So I bought a couple of tickets for him and I, and then literally like 10 minutes later, I get a text reminder that I've got a rehearsal that night.
Oh.
I act in improv shows at a local improv theater. More like Whose Line Is It Anyway than any sort of stand-up. It's not stand-up. Okay. It's just like actual shows of which can be like the Whose Line shows, but also are long-form improv. If you ever want to see me do anything like that, I don't know why you would, but if you do, and you're in the St. Petersburg area, let me know, and I'll tell you when, if I am performing. But we just started I just got cast in a new show, and it's going to be kind of like The Office, but improv.
Okay.
So it's going to be like an hour-long episode of The Office, but we're going to improv the whole thing. And so yesterday was the first rehearsal, and it, of course, right over the top of the thunderbolts.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up, my wife was like, well, we got to do something with this other ticket. And I'm like, well, ask him if he's got any friends. And I mean, I know my son, he doesn't have any friends.
that you know of. That's true. Sometimes you never know.
So she says he's going to call Noah. And I'm like, okay, I'll text him as well. And those lines got crossed. So my eldest son is named Noah. He's in Tampa.
Oh, I see.
He's got a car now. So I texted Noah and said, do you want to go see the Thunderbolts with your brother? And he said, yes. I said, well, then come down here right now. And at the same time, he was calling his friend Noah. And my wife was like,
Noah's not that common a name, so.
I was like, so she looks at me and she goes, well, I guess we're going to have to get another ticket.
Yeah, sounds like.
Not only do I not get to see this, I now get to pay for an extra ticket so that another kid can see it.
Right.
So I did not see the Thunderbolts. My sons came back and said,
to it.
I did buy 3 tickets for it, though.
Right.
And my sons came back and said I would have loved it. So
okay. I mean, it will be on Disney Plus soon enough.
Closest I've got to going to the movies in like 2 years.
Yes.
It was so close, Rob. I was right there.
Tom's biannual trip to the movie theater. Tickets in hand, but just the actual viewing.
On my phone. Regal Theaters is now texting me and emailing me and asking me how well they serviced me.
And when you're
I was
like,
not
back.
Well at all, yes. Sir.
Although pretty hard to blame them for your personal experience on that one. That wasn't really the theater's fault, that one.
No.
They should have known. They should have reminded you before you clicked purchase that you had
I should have looked at my calendar. It's Memorial Day.
Right.
It's a Monday.
Yeah.
And I spent the entire day thinking it was Sunday.
Yeah.
Because of how it felt.
Day
it
off
felt
type
like
of thing,
Sunday.
Yeah. What is all this AI for if it isn't going to remind you of your own appointments? So yes,
why are Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos listening in on all my conversations if they're not going to say, hey, don't buy those tickets?
Right.
You got something to do tonight, nerd.
Now, as far as what I've watched during this past week, should I start with the more serious or with the more fun? Which do you think?
I
think I'm going to go more fun first. It's also the order in which I watch things this week. So, I, having finished up Mythic Quest on Apple TV Plus, I still have my Apple TV Plus subscription, and I figure I might as well use it while I'm still paying for it. So I began the relatively new show, The Studio. This is Seth Rogen with his regular writing partners that he uses all the time. And so this is a farcical, satirical parody of Hollywood. So Seth Rogen's character in the first episode gets named the new studio head of a fictitious Hollywood movie studio after his mentor has been sort of unceremoniously let go. This is like, Seth Rogen is very well connected in Hollywood. He knows everybody, so the number of celebrities showing up in this show is wild. Like, absolutely every part is played by a very, very well-known celebrity, and sometimes they're playing themselves, like they're using their real name, or sometimes, like Catherine Hahn is in this series, and she's playing, like, some other person at the studio where he's working and is not using the name Catherine Hahn. So it's this mixture of everybody in the show is super well known, but some of them are playing themselves and some of them aren't. But you could basically say that the studio is Anxiety, the show. And that is going to appeal to some people, and it's not going to appeal to some people because everything is mile a minute, hectic, going back on your word, scramble. I've only watched the first 2 episodes, but they are both very much like that. And yeah, it's all cringe and kind of awful because he's coming in, he's been working at this studio, very fastidiously, doing his job, kind of keeping his head down, but getting his little, inputs in here and there. And he's got his best friend played by Ike Barinholtz, who is gunning for the same position, but Seth Rogen's character ends up getting it. And all along he's been like, okay, like they've got a new owner at the studio, and that's why this change is happening. And he's like, we want to make money, but I want to make like tasteful, artful movies. If we're gonna have a product, you know, like a movie that's based on a product, he wants to do it like the way Barbie was done, where you kind of subvert it and you get in an auteur, director, writer, and you do things that way. And of course, their first big project is they have to make a movie out of Kool-Aid, and there is some fun with Martin Scorsese and his idea of what they're going to make the Kool-Aid movie about.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. This is how it begins. And promises are made to Martin Scorsese, who is actually played by Martin Scorsese playing himself. And then, yeah, the owner of the studio has other ideas, and hence anxiety and cringeworthiness and going back on your wordness all ensues. So second episode is titled The Oneer, and not surprisingly, it is a oneer, meaning that, you know, you at least never see any cut or edit in the shot.
Right.
And they make a point of saying that. So the episode is called The Oneer. It is about shooting a oneer on one of the movies that the studio is working on, which is being directed by Sarah Polley, who is playing herself. She hasn't done a ton of acting recently. She has become more a writer and director, but she is playing Sarah Polley, the director, in the studio show. And so they shoot it all as a oneer. And the whole premise is that there's a very important shot. This is a low budget movie that they're doing. They literally have this one day. They're trying to shoot it at golden hour, which is right as the sun is just beginning to set. They're trying to get 2 takes in. They've been rehearsing all day, but as the new studio head and being someone who loves the artistry side of it, he's like, I have to be there. I have to see this. And of course, he ends up causing problems on every time they start to try to start the take. But they shot the episode, what we're watching is being shot as a oneer at golden hour. They're not faking.
It's meta.
Yeah, they're not faking that this was like being shot on an outdoor set. This wasn't like done in the volume or something. And they're all making the meta jokes about, well, if you want to give us the millions of dollars to shoot this on the volume, I guess we can stitch shots together, but it's actually be a lot better if we can do this one shot. And it's like, they had to time this out so that he's driving away right as the sun just sets. And so it's like, they had to shoot this for real. And it sure looked like it really was a single seamless shot, because they were like, we're not going to have people, you know, somebody passes in front of the camera so you can hide the cut and all of that stuff. And it is all very meta as they do it. But like, yeah, it is anxiety for the like 27 minutes that you're watching this episode. And everybody wants something from him. And yeah, it's just, yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's tremendously well done, spotting all the incredibly famous people who are sometimes playing tiny little bit parts in the background.
Right.
Like Steve Buscemi is going to show up for like half a second, like just to be there. So it's pretty wild. It's a fantastic show so far. So check out the studio if you have Apple TV Plus. So here, huge whiplash in tone. I am finishing up the final 2 movies of the 2025 Oscar Best Picture nominees, and so this week I just finished, like right before we started recording. I made us a little bit late starting. I had to apologize. But yes, I finished I'm Still Here. And so, yeah, like I say, tonal whiplash as expected from all the trailers and everything like that. Yeah, this is a gut punch of a movie. Not a fun watch whatsoever, but it is really, really good. This is 1970s Rio de Janeiro, taking place when there was military dictatorship at the time. And we're focusing on one family. This is based on a true story, which actually they didn't even really promote it that way in the trailers or anything. And
right.
they don't do the thing at the very beginning of the movie saying based on a true story. We find out at the end it is based on a true story, based on a biography that was written by the son in this family, who is not at all the focus of this movie. So this is really focused on the mother in this family, the matriarch of this family, because the father is a former congressman before the military took over in Brazil at that time. So he's a former congressman, and one day he is disappeared. People come and knock on their door. They say they just need to ask him a few questions, and then he's gone. He's just gone. And the mother and the eldest daughter actually moved away for schooling before this all happened. But the second oldest daughter, who's now treated like the eldest daughter, she's looking after the youngest kids type of thing as they do. So yeah, the now sort of eldest daughter of the house and the mother there also questioned for a period of time. And it's brutal, but it is done so subtly. It's done so realistically. It's done so believably, because all along, like in all the other scenes of this movie, everything is like life does go on as it does in real life. The world doesn't stop, especially not for everybody else, but not even for this family, right? Like you don't just stop. It's a devastating, bewildering, horrible thing with the father just having been disappeared. But I mean, there's no information. The worst part of it is nobody knows anything about what is going on, where he is, whether he's alive, whether he's coming back, any of this stuff. Nobody has any idea. And they're trying to shelter the younger kids in the family, and they're hiding stuff from them. And when a tiny little nugget of information does get out, of course, the middle daughter is, absolutely just livid at everybody, understandably so, that she's been being lied to and everything like that. But none of it is played like over the top emotion at all. Everything is restraint. Everything is just contained and held, and like you never even get to see anybody cry. If somebody does cry, it's like real life. They go and hide behind a door, and you know they're going to break down and cry, but we don't get to see it because the family didn't get to see it and other people didn't get to see it, and it's all just tense and but the whole thing is, through all of this, I mean, it really does focus on the mother. Like, when they take a photo, she still tells the children to smile. And she says, like, let's when people see this photo, let's let them know that he's missing. Like, we're not going to hide that. We're going to try to have, because like this, they're a well-off family. They're not like the richest of the rich, but he is a former congressman, and they're a well-off family. So they have other well-off friends, and some of them work in the press, and some of them are lawyer, and things like that. And they're like, let's not let him disappear from our memory. Like, we're going to still try and talk about him. We're going to still try and find things out. And at the age of 48, she goes back to university and becomes ultimately a lecturer on human rights, like 20 years after his disappearance. It's like, it's a remarkable story. It's a remarkable movie. It's really, really well done, but by no means, again, like I've mentioned with some of the other Oscar nominees, by no means is it a fun watch. But it's also not.
That's why nobody likes the Oscars, because the movies are like, you're like, ah. And I don't think a movie has to be depressing or, full of sadness in order to be emotional or well acted or important. I mean, I understand that fight scenes or action scenes literally take time away from the actors doing acting stuff, but it doesn't mean that the movie doesn't have a message or a point or anything. I don't know.
This is really, really well done, though.
I understand. I understand. I'm just talking about Oscar nominees in general.
Yeah, the sort of like, cliche of what it is that they nominate. Yeah,
and as somebody who, I don't like it when people are like, oh, these intellectuals are talking down to me or whatever, or that there's some sort of divide between the common people and in the ivory tower people, because I've been on both sides of that as far as going to grad school and everything else, and I've seen that. But the Oscars, the way that you look at these movies and you're like, you're just picking this movie because that no normal person would want to watch this. This doesn't look fun to anybody but you, and it screams of elitism to me. And maybe that's not
this particular one, though. I'm still here. I will not put it in that category. I know what you're saying, and that totally makes sense. But this one is like, this is an important watch, and because, unfortunately, it is very germane to what is happening to many people right now.
Sure.
And not necessarily in Brazil, but certainly elsewhere in the world, including there are people being disappeared from the United States right now. And
that is true. That is true.
And having it portrayed the way it is in this movie, where it isn't, like, why it's so affecting is that nothing about
it's not like
this
Taken. Somebody gets disappeared and then dad goes out on some sort of,
like, nothing about this is
rampage
at all heightened or removed. Like, you really feel, and they do a really good job of making you like this family, and not in a over the top way. Like, you get to watch them living their lives for like the first half hour of the movie, and they're a normal family, and like the shots of outside, like the beaches and stuff in Rio de Janeiro, it's like, man, those are some good looking people hanging out on the beach. It's just like, it's, you know, and just having that setting and giving you that really impact of what they've lost. You know, even though they're still living on that beach for a long time, it's like, but it does such a good job of so much is taken away by the absence of this person and especially the not knowing. And it's so believable, and so it's really, really well done, and it is super affecting, and it is important, and it is a real life story, and it's absolutely germane to things that are happening today. So I do highly recommend it. It absolutely deserves its nomination. It's pretty high up there on my list for thinking that this could have been the best movie of the year. It is absolutely deserving of all of that, but it is gut punch of a movie. Yeah.
Right. And most of these movies, even, you know, when I do see them, not all of them, but with the Oscar nominees, when I do see the movies, I say, okay, I can see why this is, you know, this is considered a good movie. It's like going to, a high-end restaurant or whatever and eating some, you know, really fancy food that's got like foam on it or whatever. I'm like, I can see what you did here. Yeah. I can see that this is good. I also am still hungry. You would like to have something more.
Or it's how, you're like, on a regular basis, how often would I come back here realistically?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. This is not something I'm going to be craving for the rest of my life. Whereas a good bowl of spaghetti is actually something I want every single day.
But there is a line at the end of this movie, I'm Still Here, that I'm not going to say now because I want people to watch the movie and see it for themselves. But so applicable to everything that is happening today. That it's really important that people get that message about times do change, things do get better, and there is the desire to maybe focus on looking forward, not back, which is totally understandable. But that there is an importance in looking back, and there is an importance in not just remembering what has happened, but keeping it real for those responsible, for those who have lost. Like, it's really poignant and well delivered. So big thumbs up, but a downer for sure.
Again, and while I agree with everything you're saying, those messages that they're sending in movies like this that are important, that should be seen and should be heard by people, are just not going to be heard by people because they're in movies that a minority of people are going to watch. So if you can get that message into a movie that is more palatable to the masses, if you will, and I consider myself part of those masses because I've got limited time, and guess what I don't want to do is watch a movie that's going to send 2 hours of my life where I'm like at the end going, well,
oof. Like that's how I felt. Like, you know, I was anxious and tense the entire time.
Let me think about something happier, like how the heck am I going to afford another house, you know, or you know, what I'm going to do with my flooded home, because that seems to be happier than the last 2 hours of my life. Those sunshine and
rainbow thoughts,
yeah. So I think that if, you know, it's a double-edged sword. Like I said, I think that movies like this should be made and are important to make. But if if that message doesn't reach the people that it's supposed to reach because of the vehicle in which you delivered it, then are you doing the most good that you could be doing? I don't know. It's up, I don't know.
Real life story based on a real biography. So I give it a huge thumbs up. Yeah.
All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to the website, find our shows, show notes, links to the articles and products that we'll be referring to. We've got a Flickr album that you can follow along with the pictures. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where those Flickr album pictures will be part of the video. So Rob, you can just put it on the background and listen, and then when we say, hey, look at this stupid picture or look at this awesome picture, and then you can look over and look at it and then
that's
go back
right
to work. Yes. You can contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, send us a PayPal donation. And this week, Ray did that. Thank you very much, Ray.
Yeah, Ray, thank you for that PayPal donation. We very much appreciate your financial support.
If you want to be a monthly contributor or you're just a heavy Patreon user, go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can sign up to become a subscriber to our podcast. They'll take a minimum of $1, maximum of however much you want to put in there.
That's right.
Maybe zeros you want to put at the end, but lots would be great. I have a house to buy.
Yeah. No kidding.
Rob apparently is probably going to overpay on the black market for another Switch 2 or whatever it is.
Nope, just lining up, costing my time instead of my money.
That's right. Doesn't value his time. And we currently have 132 patrons, so thank you to all of those. Thank you.
That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thank you to our 132 patrons over there.
All right. So if you can't support us financially, support us in some other way, and we'll mention you here. So Bertrand went and got a movie code for us to test. He's in Canada, and it's from a disc that his girlfriend bought for him. But the code doesn't work in Canada, so he didn't know which country it might work in. So we tested it in the United States, and in fact, it does work there.
Right.
So there you go.
Fantastic service. And thank you, Bertrand, for sending in that code.
We really are humanitarians over here.
They should
they should have a poignant Oscar movie about us testing movie codes.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm sure there's a way to make that happen, but
that'll probably happen. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from a couple of our listeners, including Joe. Am I supposed to say a last name here? I guess.
Well, it's just this is Joe Kluznik, our once in a while guest co-host whenever folks are away. So yeah, that's just so we know it's that Joe and not a different Joe.
A different Joe. Okay. So he's glad that we are posting the podcast prior to Friday each week when so many other podcasts post their episodes. We become his official Thursday commute listen now. Also, his kids went through Scouts, so hearing about that and the end of high school makes him appreciate that all of his kids are currently either attending or already graduated from college.
He's just giving you some encouragement and some hope there, Tom.
That's right.
There's light at the end of the tunnel from all of it.
We also got notes from Bertrand, from Jefferson, and John. So John went and predicted that the Carolina Hurricanes would win this.
John is saying
Rob, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Rob, yeah. Would win the Stanley Cup this year as a Carolina fan himself, and given the way the first 3 games against the Florida Panthers went, could Rob please never predict the Carolina will win the Cup ever again? I did. So one of the parties I had to go to this weekend, I was exhausted. It had been a long day, and that was the day we were looking at houses real quick.
Okay.
We're going to look at some houses real quick.
Oh, yeah, that
which
happens.
Turned out to be about 3 hours of looking at 3 or 4 hours.
That is relatively quick for looking at houses. 3 hours is not that bad.
Yeah, we drove all over the place. And I was like, okay, well, now that we're back, I'm going to take a nap because I'm an old man. And my wife was like, we got to go to this party. We got to go. We got to go right now. We're gonna change our clothes and go. I'm like, she's like, well, there's a pool you can swim. I'm like, you are not selling this to me right now. So they had the Oilers and the
versus Dallas.
The one with
Dallas
the D.
Stars. Yeah, Dallas Stars.
Okay. Yeah, and it was like a 6-1 blowout. Very exciting. I slept through most of that.
That's all right.
Went to this party and slept on their couch for 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, so
my son was there making fun of me. He said, I think he took a video.
It does seem like I might have jinxed the Carolina Hurricanes. Sorry, John. But they did come back and win the 4th game. They'd have to win 4 in a row to get out of this series because Florida very convincingly won the first 3 games in that series. So it seems a little unlikely that it's very, very rare that a team comes back and wins 4 in a row in a major comeback like that. So it's looking pretty likely we're going to have a repeat of last year's Stanley Cup final of the Edmonton Oilers versus the Florida Panthers. And we'll see if the outcome is the same yet again or if Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers actually get that first Stanley Cup for the guy who's considered to be the best hockey player in the world right now, but is still awaiting his first Stanley Cup. So could happen this year.
Once again, we got notes of gratitude from Joe Kluznik, Jefferson, Bertrand, and John. Thank you for thanking us.
That is right. And I'll say those names one more time so they came from my lips. We got Joe, Jefferson, Bertrand, and John. Thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We very much appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So in the news, Denon Marantz, still using the Massimo consumer name at the moment, put out a new training video to introduce the addition of Dirac Active Room Treatment, or the ART thing, which was officially announced along with the release of the new Marantz AV 20 Pro. So not only did that video reinforce their commitment to adding Dirac ART capability via the promised future firmware update by the end of the year, quote unquote, they say, but in the video's description, they also made it explicit which Denon and Marantz receiver and pre-pro models will be able to accept a new firmware and run Dirac ART as a result. So, drum roll, please. It's every model that has 4 subwoofer pre-out connections.
Yeah.
So, look at the back of your receiver. If you have 4 pre-out connections, you qualify. So that's the Denon X3800H, 4800H, 6800H, A10H, and A1H.
Yeah.
And for Marantz, it's the Cinema 50, 40, 30, AV20, and AV10. So really, that's about as good as we could have hoped for, but no word yet on what the Dirac ART upgrade is going to cost. They did mention that you'll need to have Dirac Live full bandwidth and Dirac Live bass control in order to add Dirac ART. And they will, of course, give the option to purchasing a bundle that includes everything you need from Dirac all at once. When is Odyssey going to add something that you can buy separately? Because I feel like that's...
multi-QX.
I'm being serious here.
Yeah.
I feel like that is the next logical step for them. So think of it this way. Denon and Marantz and Onkyo and these other ones, they all needed to have some room correction.
Sure.
And they created their own, and they all sucked. And Odyssey came out and said, "We got a good one. You can license from us," and they did. And then they started having different tiers, and eventually they were like, "We got to shrink these tiers because the lower ones really blow, and the upper ones are great, but there's too many tiers, and people are getting confused. So now we just got like a couple of them now, right?" But why hasn't Odyssey come out with anything new? What are they doing over there? Why have we not heard from anything from them?
Multi-QX was the thing. That is an optional paid add-on.
Please. Multi-QX is useless for most people.
That's not well. I go for most people, okay, but no, it's got features that there is no other way of accessing. The number of filter options given in Multi-QX is tremendous, and one thing that I really like is the ability to change the low-end roll-off slope of your speakers in the crossover section, which is not something that you can alter just natively on the built-in version or in the Odyssey Editor app. So yeah, no, there's reasons to pay the extra and get Multi-QX, and paying what it costs to get Multi-QX is less than adding any level of Dirac as the optional paid add-on to the Denon and Marantz's. So yeah, there you go. Just on a programming note before we go forward, we've got extra space above your head now as far as where the camera is situated. So
I'm just slouching.
That'll happen.
Leave me alone. All right, Aperion Audio has expanded their Theatrus series of high-output folded ribbon tweeter speakers with the additions of their slim stack models, the T80SL, the T65SL.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to figure out where the L is coming from. Where's this L coming from?
Yeah, I mean, the L is actually the new part of these names. So, long?
What?
Because they had a T.
Why won't your names make sense? Why can't you? You could make sense. You could make sense. You couldn't just adding a letter to the. Did somebody's name?
I don't know.
With L, and that was their idea, and they were like, "All right, we'll make it." Lonnie came up with this, so put L at the end.
I'm gonna say it's for long.
T80SL, T65SL are on-wall models, 5.1 inches in depth without their grills, while the T80WL and the T65WL are in-wall models. So the S is on.
Yeah, S is like slim. W is wall, in wall. L is for long, I think.
With the fully seated rear enclosures already integrated. So the in-wall ones have enclosures, so that's good. The driver complements are exactly the same as the previous T80S, 65S on walls, and the 80W, 65W in walls. But instead of having the pair of drivers beside the MTM vertical stack of mid-range drivers and folded ribbon tweeters, which created more of a square shape with the older models, the new slim stack versions put the two woofers above and below the MTM stack, creating a much smaller, slimmer cabinets that ought to fit more easily between standard wall studs. So, prices. Mm-hmm. The ADSL is $15.50 each. That's not $15. That's $1,550 each. So the S's were $14.50. The 65 SLs are $12.50 each, or the other ones were $1,100.
Yeah, so the square-shaped version with the two woofers beside are less expensive than these elongated versions.
Yeah. The T80WLs are $1,700 each. The 80Ws were $1,550, and the 65WLs are $1,400 each. And the 65s were W only was $1,200 each. Mm-hmm. So it's like what?
So it's not the same price gap on all of these. I'm not quite sure why. Yeah, so the in-wall models are actually the more expensive out of all of these. They always were the original versions, the ones with the two woofers to the sides of the mid-range tweeter, mid-range stack. Those the in-wall versions were $100 more than the slim on-wall versions. Now there's a different gap in price because it's three. Yeah, we got $150 more, $200 more on one of them, $100 more on the biggest one. So I'm not quite sure where all of that is coming from.
Weird pricing. I'll be honest with you. It seems like it should be standard. That's weird. I mean, I can see what they're doing here.
Absolutely. This is probably the design they should have been originally, but I think they were maybe going for something that was kind of reminiscent of the old M&K speakers with the original square designs. That's kind of what they looked like.
Yeah. So if you want to need a narrow width, but you also need/want the full output capabilities, new slim stack models come in above the single woofer T80S, T83, whatever. Just, I don't know. Okay, there's too many T's and numbers. I'm not doing that.
Okay,
you can figure it out.
What it was is they had the square versions, but then they also had versions that were a single tweeter. I can't remember if it's a single or dual mid-range drivers, but then just a single woofer. So those were the ones that look basically like a bookshelf speaker, but they're just slimmer. They either go in the wall or on the wall. But these ones have the two woofers, one above, one below, and so they have the higher output capability as a result.
I'm going to see what these are. Okay, I'm scrolling. No, that didn't help. All right. This is very confusing. Okay. I don't mind this design. They're very expensive. I mean, they must have insane output for how
they have very high. Yeah, they're high sensitivity, high power handling. So these are meant for large theaters. But I really, really like that they have the fully sealed design for those in-wall models. Yes. I dislike in-walls that don't have a backer box, and it's so much better when that backer box is just integrated right in. You don't even get a choice about it. But with the regular dog leg design for attaching it to the cutout, and then comparing it to other speakers with this type of output capability, these are less expensive than what you're going to find from, say, Perlisten or the THX Ultra Certified KEF in-wall speakers, that are at the top of their line. These are a good amount less expensive than those. So when you compare them to the direct competition in terms of size and output capability, these are a good deal. So yeah, they're not cheap speakers in and of themselves, but look at what else you might consider for this type of output capability, and they're going to come up as a good deal.
Yeah, the square ones are weird. I understand they do look like a lot like those M&K ones, they would be fine in like a custom install situation where you are putting them
behind a screen,
or like you are building a false wall all the way around the home theater, sort of thing. Where you're building the
THX baffle wall style, which is really what they were meant for.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. All right. Questions, Josh. So Josh was trying to connect his Denon AV receiver to his house's Wi-Fi. That's never been any sort of problem in the past, but for some reason this time, a warning popped up to say he needs to sign into his HEOS account first, and when he declined, it said that if he doesn't sign into HEOS, Wi-Fi will be disabled completely. Suck it. So that's definitely new, right? Like he always knew he'd have to create a HEOS account if he ever actually wanted to use HEOS, but he's never bothered with it before. So what's going on here? Why would Denon suddenly force everyone to create a HEOS account that they might not want just to be able to use Wi-Fi? What goes on in boardrooms in this country? It flummoxes me. So for you to ask this question of me, who says that they should hire Gen Xers, or not Gen Xers, Gen Zers or Gen Alpha or whatever they're calling them these days, just to sit in a boardroom and say, well, that's dumb. Like literally just sit in the corner on their phone and put a mic right next to their, like let them listen to what's going on in the room as they're, Snapchatting or whatever the kids do these days, and just listen to what they say as you talk about stuff. And if they say something like, like that's all that you, if they make a sound like that, you should stop what you're doing and say, okay, we shouldn't do this. And there's a reason. Why did they make that noise? Like, don't talk to them because they're not going to tell you what you did wrong. You just know that you did it wrong and you just have to figure out what it is. I absolutely believe that that's what's happening here is they're like, we want to have your data. And if you want to, this is some way to have it.
Seems like the most likely scenario for sure. Yeah. Certainly. I've never needed, been required to have a HEOS account in the past. Now, I have been hardwiring my AV receivers for the past little while, so I didn't personally notice this thing happen. And then I also do have a HEOS account that I've been logged into, so I didn't get any sort of new warning after whatever the most recent firmware update was. So I didn't personally notice this, but I mean, he's got a screenshot of the thing right there. It's not like he made that up, and it's saying right there that it will disable Wi-Fi functionality for declining to create a new HEOS account and sign into it. So it's pretty black and white there. So yeah, I mean, Tom is right. The only thing that makes any sense is that somewhere on the food chain of decision making, they decided that they want to get that user account data. And this is, I guess, one way of sort of making that happen. It seems as though I wouldn't even know. This might pop up even with hardware because, like I say, I am signed into my HEOS account, so I have no idea whether that applies to the wired or not. It does only mention Wi-Fi functionality being disabled, not the Ethernet connection. But I suppose that would be the only way around it at this point. If you don't have an Ethernet jack anywhere near your AV receiver, then get yourself a bridge if you want to bypass this. But of course, probably the simpler solution is to create a dummy HEOS account, because it's not as though it costs money to have a HEOS account. So you sign up for a free Yahoo email and create a dummy account, and that'd be a way around it.
Yeah, I've done that plenty of times before where you're just like, I literally don't care what this account does. It does one thing. It allows me to sign into the HEOS. And
I mean, it is the reason for Yahoo.com to still exist, is for the dummy email accounts.
AOL would still be around if they had figured that one out. Tony has thoroughly read up on all the generally accepted practices for positioning multiple subwoofers, but he's been curious about one idea that he's never seen mentioned. What if you put a single sub smack dab in the center of an enclosed rectangular room? What would that do? And what about putting a big old bass trap smack dab in the middle? How would a 2-foot cube of insulation placed in the exact center of an enclosed rectangular room compare to super chunks positioned in the corners? Could you have some sort of coffee table bass traps like that? Would it be helpful? So, okay, we know that putting a sub smack dab in the middle of the room does not make for even bass all the way around the room, which is, I think, the question that he's at is like, would that be the best place for it?
Right.
We know that. And I think that the Floyd Tool paper did put subs right smack dab in the room measure stuff.
Yeah, when Todd Welty was doing the multiple subwoofer research, I mean, he simulated beforehand oodles and oodles of different subwoofer positions, including what would happen if you, literally filled this room with subwoofers. Would that be the very best? If it turns out that 2 is better than 1 and 4 is better than 2, then is 86 inside of the room going to be the very, so I bet, of course,
floor to ceiling subs.
Yeah, that was done with simulation. So I don't actually know. I didn't in the write-up, they didn't show an example of either simulating or, in fact, practically testing a single subwoofer smack dab in the middle of the room, because he was sort of considering, what realistically it's probably going to be positioned around the perimeter of this room. But they did mathematically say, well, mathematically what is going to be best, and that would be a quarter of the room's width away from one side wall and a quarter of the room's length away from either the front or the back wall. That's going to be mathematically the best position to have the fewest number of superimposing, doubling up standing waves. I mean, there are going to be standing waves for any single sound source that's playing bass in an enclosed room. There will be standing waves. But what we're really trying to do is avoid having any of them doubling up on each other by, perfectly matching both length and width and height of the room. So if you stick a sub directly in the very, very center of a room, and I assume he's meaning on the floor and not literally elevated so that it's centered height-wise, but maybe he means that too. Maybe. But I think he was talking about like a coffee table placement type of thing, and maybe that could be the very middle of your room because your seats are somewhere behind the midline of the room lengthwise. So you could theoretically put a sub inside of your coffee table, and maybe that's right in the middle of the room. That is going to still end up doubling up or canceling out certain standing waves in that room. Because if you just think about, the sound wave does emanate, even though the driver is going to be on one side of the sub, or maybe it's a down-firing sub. So effectively to the sides and the front and the back of the room, it's sort of all radiating out truly in a spherical fashion. But in practice, at frequencies this low, it is almost a spherical radiation of sound that's coming out of this sub. So that sound wave, that initial wave front is coming out in all directions, going off, hitting the side walls, hitting the front and back wall, hitting the ceiling and the floor too, coming back towards the center of the room, and at certain wavelengths, given whatever the dimensions of your room might be, there's going to be times where that's coming back just as that driver is firing out again, or just as that driver is pulling into the cabinet again, and that is going to create your cancellations or your doubling up of any frequencies that match as far as the sound wavelength versus the dimensions of your room. So you're still going to have quite severe doubling up and canceling out problems if you do that. Positioning the sub in the very middle of the room is not a panacea for eliminating standing waves, unfortunately. There really is only one solution for ameliorating standing waves, and that is more than one source of sound for the bass.
Yeah. So, and you can kind of test this out on your in your own room, really, and you don't have to do this, but you know that this is true because many people don't put their seats, exactly where you're supposed to. They're closer to the middle of the room. There may be a third in, but the room is almost squarish. A lot of rooms are, especially if you're using a bedroom or something like that. Your seat is very close to the middle of the room. You may, when you recline, your head might be back far enough so that you're not in the middle of the room, but the seat itself might be closer to the middle of the room, and people use the crawl for bass method effectively all the time. And that sub is very close to the middle of that room. And they're not going, well, every single space sounds exactly the same against my wall. I can place it anywhere. Yeah. There is spaces that sound best. And so you sort of know this already. We know this already from empirical evidence and reporting and stuff like that it doesn't create like the best. Now, as far as putting a bass trap as a coffee table, a bass trap, well, first of all, we like to put bass traps in the corners because of the number of waves that are all interacting at the same time. That everything's bouncing around there. But I don't care where you put a bass trap. You want to put a big 2-foot cube of insulation somewhere in your room? Knock yourself out, man. Put a bunch of them. It certainly is not going to hurt anything. It's
that is going to take some of that sound wave energy and convert it into heat.
Yeah. So it's not a bad. It's not the best place to put it, but the best place to put a bass trap when you have limited options is wherever you can put a bass trap.
Sure.
Just put it there. And if you're like, I have a coffee table and it's empty and it's always going to be empty. And in fact, I threw it was
noises are being
I guess my son's doing dishes, so that's fun. Something might be broken. I'm not sure what that was. So if you're hearing sounds of dishes, the beginning of the podcast when Rob was talking, he was definitely emptying the dishwasher.
Okay.
I told him to. I didn't realize he was going to do that. But because I tell him to do stuff all the time. But if you throw like a sheet or like a black cloth over the top of your coffee table anyways, you're like, well, I could shove the inside of it with insulation. It could be anything up there. Do it. Do it. It's
or
better
very
than
often,
not doing it. That's
you have one of those coffee tables. It's like, okay, you got the top surface that you're using, of course, and then it has like a shelf underneath it. And sometimes either like you really don't use that, so like the space in between the bottom of the top shelf and the top of the middle shelf, like you're like, oh, I cover that anyway, or I don't really use it, so maybe I just fill that with insulation. Or underneath that second shelf, like between there and the floor. You're like, I really never look there, and maybe I'll just put insulation there. Yeah, so like when Tom says it's not quote unquote the best place to put it, we just mean it's not the most efficient place to put it. Because if you put a bass trap in the edge of a room or a corner of a room, then what's happening is, okay, sound wave comes along, it meets the front surface of that bass trap, it goes through the bass trap, it travels through the air gaps that are between all these fibers, but as it's knocking into all the fibers of that insulation, some of that kinetic sound energy gets converted into heat, but then it goes through that bass trap, maybe goes through a little air gap that you left behind the bass trap, especially if it's, corner mounted, straddling a corner, hits the boundary that is the wall surface itself, and comes back through the bass trap again a second time and loses that energy again as it's doing that right at the point of incidence where that reflection happened, where that reflection is strongest. It's meeting up with the rear surface of the bass trap again and coming back out. So when you put it in the very middle of the room, that's happening to some extent because you have a sound wave that came from your subwoofer, it bounced off of one wall, it meets the bass trap that's in the middle of your room, and it loses some energy as it goes through there and re-radiates out the other side and hits the other wall. So I mean, it absolutely is getting that, but it's not right at that point of incidence. It's in the middle of the room. The sound wave has already traveled some distance, so it's absolutely doing the job of a bass trap. It is lowering the overall kinetic energy in the room every time the sound waves meet up with that insulation, but it's just not quite as efficient because you're not getting all of the advantages of straddling something in the corner where you're getting that like extra free depth to the panel since there's an air gap behind it, using the geometry of the room to your advantage. But yeah, certainly not a negative thing to do. If you did it, we're not going to be like, oh, you should take that out, it's hurting the sound. Absolutely not. It's totally fine. You're adding absorption to the room. And like we've said before, when it comes to the bass frequencies, you can basically never over bass trap a small acoustic space. You could fill the whole room with insulation, and technically speaking, the bass is still fine in there. You haven't actually heard it. You heard all the other frequencies, and you've made it very hard. You've made it very hard to set up your system in your seat when you filled the entire room with insulation. But the bass in there is.
But if you're wearing a VR headset, you can make it look like anything.
That's right.
GP. I don't know who GP is, but this is their question. Yeah. GP. So, we're like fans of 98-inch TVs, right? Not necessarily, but I'm compared to other things, yes, I am. It seems as though we're recommending them more and more these days, but he recalls when his mother got a 75-inch TV, and getting that size down into her basement was quite the undertaking. With the way stairs are laid out in her house, they ultimately had to take the 75-inch TV out of its box, and it still just barely made it around the corner. So does it honestly make sense to be handing out 98-inch TV recommendations like candy? Such recommendations should at least come with a disclaimer that you really want to make sure you can actually physically maneuver it into the intended room. Yes? Maybe ja? Mm-hmm. Maybe it will fit into your wall just fine, but a lot of good that does if you cannot actually get into the room in the first place. I was at a house at one of these parties where there was a pool table in a room, and if you've seen Seinfeld, and they had that pool table in that room where the walls were all right there.
Yeah, George's
it
wasn't
that bad. It wasn't that bad, but it was like I saw like all the pull cues were against the wall over here, and there was a bunch of real short ones, and I was like, why are there so many short pull cues? And then I saw somebody playing pool, and I was like, because you can't get the big ones back there.
Should have been a bumper pool table in that room in that case.
I think they had to get it. It was there's a sliding glass doors. That's clearly how they got it in. But, it's not like it would have gone through that sliding glass doors with the legs on. Mm-hmm. They would have had to take it apart, which I think they have to do anyways. And then they assembled it inside the room. But getting it back out again is going to be the same process. So, okay, here's something that I think that, and while GP here, or whatever their name is correct in that we should have a disclaimer for some things, I also think that if I have to tell you that you can't get a TV down the stairs, I have to tell you a lot of things that that maybe I shouldn't be responsible for.
It's fair, though, because it can be not the easiest thing to predict. Like if you haven't moved around a lot of big screen TVs, And you're just like especially if you put the tape up on the wall, because you're trying to make sure it's actually the right screen size and that it's going to fill the field of view that you want from your desired seating distance. And you sort of eyeball that, or you take a photo of it even, and you got it all in your mind of like, okay, yeah, that's the right size. And then you go back up your basement stairs and you walk into your kitchen and you go out to your Best Buy and you buy the thing without really much of a thought. And then you're like, but actually getting it down those stairs, I kind of forgot that there's like this corner at the bottom of those stairs. Yeah. And it's like, how does a 98-inch TV get around that? I can see that happening. That's fair enough.
My parents' house in North Carolina, when they lived there, had a bonus room upstairs, and that's where their home theater was. And they bought a 56-inch plasma, which they still use to this day, many, many years ago. And they had two problems. And one of them was obviously getting the very heavy 56-inch plasma up the stairs. Did not fit. The box did not go. They had to take it out of the box, just like this guy is describing, and take it upstairs that way. But also, they had like a 36-inch CRT that they were using before, and that didn't want to go down the stairs either. The stairs. So it's not like they took out a window. They just forgot that it was such a pain to get that TV in and out. And fair enough. We do often recommend that you buy from places where they have a good return policy. And with me and my TV, when I got it before it immediately got flooded, was I paid for the unboxing. I paid for them to unbox it and set it up, or to take not set it up, but to take the box away.
Take the big packaging away.
Yeah. So they took the packaging away with them. So that means they had to get it into the room first.
Okay.
So
good trick.
So if they can't get it into the room, I'm just like, I can't accept delivery, and then they have to take it back. So you're not wrong in that. We don't always think about these things, and there's people like, oh, you're always recommending the flat panels. Now, first of all, the vast majority of this podcast, I have been recommending for large screens, projectors, because that was the only solution. But in situations like this, what you're describing, like trying to get down the stairs, that's where your ultra short throw projector is like the perfect solution, because you can get it down the stairs easily, and the screen itself is much easier to get down. I mean, you can have it shipped by Amazon.
That is GP's point, though. It's just like, because what is new is that 98-inch televisions are now plentiful and affordable, and that is new. That is a new situation. I mean, yes, it's been true for maybe 3 years at this point, but for the length of this podcast has been going, that is a relatively new development to have plentiful and affordable 98-inch TVs. A little bit of it is, yes, it goes without saying. If you're in a 4-story walk-up, apartment building in New York, you're probably not the right person to be buying a 98-inch flat panel. You got that little bit goes without saying, but I can absolutely envision the scenario that is being discussed. So one little tip, of course, is that with larger screen TVs, like if you've just been used to 55-inch TVs, which these days are, one person can pick that up quite easily, and 55-inch TVs are small enough that you can maneuver around pretty much any set of stairs. And if that's what you've been used to, even going to a 75 or an 85 or especially a 98-inch TV, people don't always consider that. Typically, like the way I've gotten any of my TVs into my place, and that's 77-inch or 75-inch, like coming up the elevator, my hallway has 2 corners that I have to go around before I get into my place. It's like, I've got to put the TV up on its side, right? Like I tip the box. I keep it in the box, but I have to tip it up on its side. If I tried to bring that in, right way up where the TV is wider than it is tall, I'm not making it around those 2 corners in my hallway, not without either scraping the box really badly or banging into something or taking off a floorboard or something like that. So, not everybody always is comfortable with turning a TV up on its side, but that is typically the way to do it. But 98-inch is starting to get pretty tall there. And you might have to find a way to like winch or lower that thing down a set of stairs, which is not the most comfortable situation. So yes, I think that's fair. It's not like it wouldn't be worth for us to mention, at least from time to time, hey,
for sure.
Do consider.
Reminder.
Do consider.
Well, 98-inch TVs, are a massive. You have to have a way of getting them in and out of the house, and as TVs get bigger and bigger, it's going to become more and more of a problem. The one thing,
yeah, I mean, the 115 inch, that is, you gotta, because I mean, that is recommended to be a 3-person lift anyway, because it is a heavy TV. And it's heavy not because the panel itself of the 115 inch that TCL is making, like the panel itself is still relatively lightweight, but they pointed out how like you can't put a structural support beam down the middle of the back of that TV. The frame that gigantic piece of glass is going into has to be structurally strong enough to not have any torsion, to not bend, and so it is a strong, big frame that goes behind there, because it's all steel and stuff like that to make sure that it isn't bending and twisting. So yeah, like the 115 is you really got to be sure you got a way to get that into your place.
Yeah, the one saving grace is that we are now seeing more and more houses that have that open floor plan, so that even if you can get like. I'm obviously shopping for houses, so I'm going into older houses and newer houses and that sort of thing. And there are houses where you're like, ooh, like, how do you get anything anywhere?
Right. Yeah.
Like I've been in houses that are like it is almost a shock. Like in New Orleans, they call them shotgun houses. I don't know if they have other names.
You can see right
anywhere,
from the front to the back.
Front to the back, and there's just a hallway. It's like you walk into the living room / kitchen, and then there's a hallway with doors on either side. And some of them are bathrooms or some of them are bedrooms. But I tell you what, they're not turning around the 100-inch TV in there. You're not going to be able to squeegee that into. You're not going to be able to bend that around.
No amount
of
of pivoting is going to make that work.
Pivot. So you definitely have to think about that. Infinite Gary. First up, when Kevin asked about shifting the position of subtitles last week, Rob mentioned how the Panasonic UB420 player has a whole subtitle setting menu that you can access via the option button on the remote once you are actually playing something with subtitles on the screen. And while the question was about moving the subtitles so they no longer fall into the black bar below the image on his 2.4:1 screen with masking, Rob also mentioned that the Panasonic subtitle setting lets you adjust how bright the subtitles are. That was music to Gary's ears. The man does not like things to be bright.
He continues
to buy brighter and brighter TVs, no matter what. He's his own worst enemy. And something he hadn't even thought to ask. So this is why people listen to this podcast. I don't know. When he recently watched the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare on his Panasonic OLED, he was a bit bothered by the subtitles being too bright. And since he has a Panasonic UB9000, he's happy to know that it won't be a problem going forward. He tried it out, and it does a trick, but he did notice that after you turn the player off, the subtitles are back to their default brightness again the next time you turn the player on, so you have to make the settings adjustments every time, so that's an FYI for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or for people, I guess, not for us.
That's probably true of the subtitle positioning as well. It's
I would think so,
disc by disc basis. It does have to be already playing in progress. You press the options button on the remote. There comes your subtitle settings there, and you can adjust those things. But yeah, it is nice. I mean, I've certainly noticed movies where in HDR, the subtitles are just glaringly bright. And I am glad to have a way to turn those down as well.
So last week we guessed that Gary's situation where an MLB game looked too dark and shadowy on this LG G3 OLED was due to differences in room lighting. He found that the game didn't look right until he changed the gamma from 2.2 to 1.9. But on his other displays in other rooms, he could leave the gamma to 2.2 and the exact same game looked fine on those other displays. Well, as we might have guessed about Gary, all of his rooms are light-controlled, and none of them are substantially brighter or darker than the other rooms. Every room in this house is essentially the light level of an overcast day outside, except for his dedicated theater, which is pitch black, of course. So we'd probably have to see his actual LG G3 in person to really be able to understand the difference he was seeing, but since Rob also owns a G3, and Tom used to have a C2, for all the good that did me, he was curious if we ever come across a situation where he found it necessary to brighten the gamma setting as opposed to leaving it as properly calibrated level. I mean, no. Okay. Once I said it, I was done. I give Gary a little bit of a hard time here and there.
Here and there.
Like every time I open my mouth. But the reality is there have been times with HDR I'm like, geez, that's bright. Okay. You know, like subtitles or something will come on and you're like, oh, whoops, and it takes my eyes a second.
Mhm.
So fair enough, Gary. Yes, I think that dimming the subtitles here, or being able to, would be nice. But no, I've never changed anything. There's a lot of inertia in my life. Like, I don't want to have to. And if I'm not by myself, meaning my wife is in the room, me grabbing the remote to change a setting does not encourage her to stay. So I would rather her be there than not. So I don't make changes like that.
So I can think of one situation. There was one time when I was watching, it was one of the Captain America movies.
Okay.
And this was more of an experiment than anything else, because there was a scene, I can't remember which of the Captain America movies it was, but he was in a plane about to jump out of it. So I think that was the second one, Winter Soldier.
I think it's the second one, yeah. Winter Soldier.
But so the thing was, it wasn't like it was necessary to change the gamma, but I sort of did it as an experiment just to see, because I just sort of wanted to see how much below black detail is there actually in this signal, like stuff that is right now completely crushed to pure black in the shadow parts of this, because it was a dark interior of an airplane as they're flying over at night over the water. And I was like, so I just changed the gamma, and it's like there was a whole bunch of detail that it was possible to make visible, a bunch of stuff that was in the below black information. And it's hard to say raising the gamma because you're making the numerical value lower, but that's the way it works. Raising the gamma made all of that stuff that was in that below black information like visible to the eyes. So, I mean, I have done that, but not on I was just watching something live and it truly didn't look correct unless I changed the gamma. It was more of an experiment to see what was below black in the signal information. Oh gosh, I'm reticent to open a whole new can of worms. But like, what's really,
don't give the man any ideas. That's all I have to say, because we'll be dealing with the aftermath for weeks to come.
That's right. So what's really sort of eating at Gary with this, I think, is just that, like, why on this one display with this one game that he watched the exact same game on other displays with very similar ambient room lighting, and the other ones, it's like, why did that one display appear so much darker? Like that contrasty, it doesn't look quite right look. And yes, like I say, kind of opening a can of worms, but the only thing that comes to mind is it possible that whatever source he was using that's connected to the G3 was like sending out the with that black level setting where you can choose, it's either the limited range, right, the 16 to 235 limited black level range versus the full 0 to 255 black level range? Because sometimes when you're looking at an image and you're just like, either everything looks washed out or everything looks extra contrasty and is like there's a bunch of shadow detail missing. Everything's been crushed down to black. Sometimes it's that black level setting, either needing to be full range or needing to be limited range for whatever source device you're using and the display that it's connected to. Because just leaving everything at auto usually works, but not 100% of the time. The Nintendo Switch, the first one, the original Nintendo Switch, had that problem for sure. If you left it at auto and you left your TV at auto for the black level, it was incorrect. And you had to at least manually set the black level on the Nintendo Switch itself to make your TV detect things correctly. So that is not 100% out of the question. I know Gary has a plethora of different streaming devices that he uses, and he sometimes moves them around to different rooms. So the possibility of that black level setting having been off, that at this point makes more sense to me versus, like, it's not as though the LG G3
the display.
Yeah, it's not that the LG G3 is just doing gamma wrong. And also, I mean, Gary knows that because he's like, it was this one game. It was this one game. Like, everything else looked fine. He put it back to 2.2 after. So to me, that's more on the source side, or maybe that black level setting. Yeah.
I would even venture to say that, we've had like episodes of shows. Remember when, it was Game of Thrones had one episode that was like super duper dark,
ultra dark,
and everybody was all irritated by it. Especially with a live sporting event, I would not be surprised if occasionally it goes out and they're like, "Oh, somebody forgot to flip a switch," or something happened, or whatever. Or even with your local station, because these things are sent from one big place and down to your local place, and then it's shipped out to you. the reality that something, or the possibility that something could be amiss from the actual source, not just source device, but the source itself, would be more likely to me than, hey, my TV looks great with everything except for this one game I watched.
Yeah.
What's wrong with my TV? I'm not blaming the TV, my man. I'm blaming like everything else
Agreed.
first. Because if it was the TV, it would be all the time.
Yeah.
There were several headlines about how Christopher Nolan's next movie, The Odyssey, will be the first feature film shot entirely on IMAX 65mm film cameras. His prior movies required some scenes to be filmed on other formats, and while Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame were both shot entirely on IMAX certified cameras, those were digital IMAX cameras, not IMAX film cameras. So The Odyssey will be the first and therefore the best. And doesn't matter that you can't understand what anybody's saying because the volume's mixed way too low for the words, but whatever. Yeah. IMAX's CEO said that after Oppenheimer, Nolan called him and said that if IMAX could figure out how to make their film cameras quieter, he would shoot his next movie 100% in IMAX. So they got to work, and they can now provide IMAX film cameras that are 30% quieter than their previous models, which apparently was good enough for Nolan, who can't hear anything anyway. So it's here.
How many masks will the characters in the Odyssey be wearing? Because we had one character with a mask with Bane, and then we had what was that Tenet, where everybody was wearing masks for one scene, and you couldn't understand a thing anybody in that scene was saying. So how many masks will there be in the Odyssey?
There are going to be a couple. All right, the limited number of new cameras means that they are currently exclusively for Nolan's use.
He's got some pull.
God.
The man has some
pull. He
pull.
does have a little pull. I'm not... Okay, I'm not going to say anything. But they will be made available to other productions as soon as Nolan is finished using them. What stood out most to Gary, though, was the mention that for this entire running length, the Odyssey was presented in the full IMAX 1.43 to 1 aspect ratio, at least at the relatively small number of theaters that can handle that format. So what is the home release going to look like? Probably just filling the entire 16:9 aspect ratio, right? Mm-hmm. Surely there will, at the very least, be a 1.9 to 1 version for all the digital IMAX theaters that use that screen aspect ratio. So the home version might actually be a little bit closer to Nolan's 1.43 to 1. In Gary's dedicated theater room, he uses a 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio screen, and he doesn't use an anamorphic lens anymore, hasn't for quite a long time now. He just zooms in his projector to fill the screen's entire width. But does that mean that there's no light? Does that mean there is? But that does mean that there is light spilling above and below the screen. He has, of course, blacked out everything directly above and below his screen, of course. And when it's a movie with black bars, that's totally invisible. But what if Nolan actually demands that the home release uses a 1.43 to 1 aspect ratio? Is he going to be missing actors' heads? Yes. If he demands that.
If he did that,
yes.
like Zack Snyder did with the his cut of Justice League that came out exclusively on Max, which was going to be rebranded to HBO Max this summer. And I think it was HBO Max when that came out. I think it came out before the whole thing there. So yeah, if he does a Zack Snyder, I suppose, but I'm confident. I obviously don't know this for 100% certain, but I'm quite confident that if we look at all of Christopher Nolan's previous movies, where more and more of the movie he was shooting with the IMAX cameras, and he was using the film one, so it was the full 1.43 to 1 squarish aspect ratio. He did always film all of those. He framed all of those so that they would work on much wider aspect ratio screens, because he is not all the way to who did that new Metropolis or whatever it was that Coppola? I'm pretty sure it was Coppola.
It's Coppola,
right?
Yeah. Coppola, yeah.
Yeah.
Megalopolis or whatever it was called.
Yeah. So Nolan hasn't gotten to that level yet where...
Of delusion yet. Yes.
Yeah, where he's like paying his own money and demanding that it only be released in theaters and never be released at home, because Coppola has now said that, where he's like, yeah, Megalopolis will never be released at home. If you want to see it, you have to go to a movie theater. Nolan still understands that, like, he wants a wide release for his movies. So if you've ever looked over and by you I mean if you've ever seen an image or a video of somebody looking at dailies or looking at the what's just been filmed, there's a screen they look at and there's boxes on it that are on there, right? And those boxes are in the different aspect ratios of
what so the image itself is actually bigger than any of the screens that you would see it on. And then they are framing it based on that box, so that when it's released in this size image or this size screen or this size screen, was played on these things. This is where everything will be, sort of thing. Nobody's doing 4:3 anymore because they don't really exist. But you'll still see the 16:9. You'll see the 1.9. You'll see the 2.35. To 1, you'll see all those things on there on that screen. So the screen sizes will all be like sort of, it's not tape, but there'll be a transparent
a little
line
visible line on the monitor, so that they can frame the shot.
They can see that. So that's what's going to be happening here. Yes, there'll be things that you will, like in theory, if it's 16:9 or 1.9 or 2.35, there will be things you miss, but I think with like if you're going to zoom in on an image, like just say he releases it in 1.43 to 1, right? And you play it on I think the home release will still be 1.6, and I don't think they're going to have black bars on it. But even if they did, and you blew that up on your 2.35, I don't think he's going to be looking at a 2.35 screen box and going, I'm going to make sure everything's framed well for inside here. I think he's going to be looking at 16:9 at the smallest.
Well, I'm pretty sure he, like I say, we can't guarantee this, but I'm pretty sure he will frame it so that it is safe for the 1.9, because he absolutely intends to have these go to the digital IMAX theaters, as well as, like, what are there, 30 in the whole world that actually still have the 1.43 to 1? He wants it released wider than that. So there is zero question in my mind that it is going to be formatted safe for the 1.9. Now, whether he'll also format it safe for like 2.35 to 1, like Oppenheimer was, because some of those were shot in 70 millimeter wide format film. So it absolutely was shot safe for 2.35 to 1 70 millimeter presentation. But having this entire movie shot at 1.43 to 1, almost guaranteed to be framed safe for 1.9 to 1, it wouldn't shock me if a 1.9 or a 1.85 to 1 aspect is what all the other theaters get, because that's pretty common. There's a bunch of movies that are released in 1.85 to 1 still. So that to me would not be surprising, that like all the other theaters, even if the theater's native screen ratio is wide, it's a 2.4 or a 2.35 to 1 screen, that what they'll show is a 1.9 or a 1.85. That I would think is quite likely, actually. But yeah, the home release, almost certain to fill the entire 16:9, 1.76 to 1. So that is actually a little bit taller than the 1.9 that the digital IMAXs are going to be getting, because all of his previous films that did the switching IMAX ratios, they just filled the entire 16:9 when it was the IMAX side of things. They didn't do 1.9 to 1 with teeny little black bars at the top and bottom of your 16:9 screen. They just filled the full 16:9. So I'm pretty sure what we're getting at the home release will be the full 16:9. I'm almost certain 100% that it'll be safe for 1.9. But yeah, if you've got a 2.35 to 1, I would think you're going to be looking at a 16:9 aspect ratio at home. And if you want to stretch, zoom that in to fill the entire width, then I think you might have the tops of some people's heads, and certainly legs are going to be cut off. Legs 100% sure are going to be cut off. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my guess.
Yeah.
I just don't see why he would do it any other way.
Yeah.
And okay, I don't want to say anything more because I'm just going to get mean. Jefferson got his new Onkyo RZ70 receiver, and he has it connected to his JVC RS1100, which is the same as the MP5 projector. Both of these support HDMI 2.1 and 4K 120. But one of his storage devices he is still using is this Toshiba XA2 HD DVD player that tops out as 1080i 60 or 1080p 30, and it's pretty much always outputting 1080p 24. There you go.
Yep.
We've got some menu images.
These are the menu images shot off of his screen from his HD DVD player, going back a ways. Since he also has a lot of other source devices, he wound up plugging his HD DVD player into his Onkyo HDMI input labeled CD by default. He used the custom integrator web browser settings that we taught him about to set the Onkyo's HDMI bandwidth and HDCP on an input-by-input basis, but the lowest you could set them for
was 4K standard and HDCP 2.3. The HDCP setting looked like it should have offered more options, but all it showed other than HDCP 2.3 was
dash.
Everything was blacked out. And then more settings. Lots of settings here. So with those settings done, all his JVC projector would show is a blue screen or an error message that says out of range in the top right corner. But he did manage to find a way to get the HD DVD player's image to appear in the JVC's settings menu. You can change the EDID setting to either A, B, or C. It was set to A by default, and changing it to C allowed his HD DVD player to show up. EDID. Okay.
Extended display information data, yeah.
All of his other sources work with the JVC set to A, and the problem is that if he leaves it set to C, now HDR no longer works for his other sources.
Yeah.
There we go. This technology is like 15 years old. It feels like. I feel like HD DVDs are 15 years old. I mean, never.
Might be older.
So what's the solution here?
Yeah.
It would be nice to leave it in just one setting that works for everything, but is there any possibility of that? Does he need to manually switch his JVC to C every time he uses the HD DVD player and then manually set it back to A for everything else? That's not the end of the world, but it does require several clicks on the remote, so it's a bit of a hassle, and he's probably the only person in the household that would ever do it, so it wouldn't be user-friendly for anyone else. You know, all the other people in your house that are watching HD DVDs?
Right, I know, yeah.
Is there some other setting on one of the other devices that he's done wrong? He does use a Harmony Elite remote, so is there a way to program it to make the switch from A to C and back to A really easily? There's almost certainly a macro you can program to make that happen.
Yeah, that would be manually programming a macro, which, yeah. I mean... it would still, like, for anyone else, it would require some teaching and the chance that they're actually going to switch it back to A after they're done watching an HD DVD on their own without you, apparently. Not necessarily going to be the easiest thing. I mean, literally, when you're programming a macro in the Harmony, first of all, it has to be done within an activity. So I'm sure you've set up a watch HD DVD activity. And in the Harmony software, you can then choose to create a macro, which will just show up as one of the soft buttons on your touch screen on your Harmony Elite. And maybe you'll have two of them, because all you're literally doing is you're manually programming one by one. Press this button, then press this button, then press this button. It's just nothing more complicated than a list of commands. So you're just saying, okay, which device are you going to control? Which button are you going to press? You can add a delay in there if you want to. That's another thing you can do. But I mean, this will literally just be, okay, I need you to control the JVC projector. I need you to bring up the user menu. I need you to press left or right or up or down however many times to get to the settings tab that you need. Click OK. Scroll down however many clicks to get to the EDID settings. Click OK. Scroll down again to get to C. Click OK. And then program a second macro to go back to A. Like, that's kind of the only way to do it. But a lot of times those settings will be like starting position dependent, which means it could get screwed up. So yeah, it's not dead simple.
If it misses one input, just one input, then everything goes awry, and you have to go back in and figure out what it actually did, as opposed to what you thought it was going to do. And so it can be problematic.
Frankly, I have to guess that the number of times you're watching a physical HD DVD these days is not nearly as often as someone in the household is using a streaming service. And so I'm thinking that ultimately just doing it manually is realistically probably the best solution here. But going back just a little ways to the Onkyo, because if there's anything that's going to solve this for you, it's those settings in the Onkyo, because they are on an input by input basis. And there should be another option for that HDCP setting that gives you the option of setting it to HDCP 1.4. Which used to go hand in hand with the original high-speed spec, not the high-speed premium, but the high-speed spec that was 10.2 gigabits per second, and that's what your HD DVD player uses, is that original spec, the 10.2 with HDCP 1.4 was the version there. And that should be an option in that Onkyo. I mean...
But he says it's not.
Well, this is where I'm thinking maybe something needs to be actively playing in that HD DVD player before the signal is going to be detected, and even give you the option of changing that setting in the Onkyo, which is going to be challenging because your JVC, while you attempt to play that HD DVD the first time, is going to give you the out-of-range error signal, and then you're going to have to bring up the Onkyo's menu while keeping the HD DVD player. Like, this might be one where you have to temporarily plug the Onkyo's monitor out into a different display instead of your projector to, like, just get that setting to show up in the Onkyo's HDCP setting, because once that is set to 1.4, that is the most likely thing to get this working. So that's essentially the answer. None of it is super simple and easy, but if that doesn't work, if there's just no way to get this working, then the happy news is you found a way to get the image to show up on screen. That's great, but I would probably just leave it at the manual you do it, because I think HD DVDs are few and far between.
Yeah. He's not exactly buying any more these days. He's got his debut carbon turntable that he wants to connect to his new Onkyo receiver as well. He does not consider himself an audiophile. He's not super into vinyl or anything. He simply has a collection of old vinyl records that he would like to still be able to play whenever he wants. And when he does play them, he'd like them to sound as good as they reasonably can. The thing is, it's positioned 13 feet away from his receiver, and all of the standard phono cables with an included ground connection seem to stop at about 10 feet. He doesn't want to spend all that much on a phono cable, and the places that sell 15-foot lengths seem to charge like $120 or more, even monoprice. So he found an RCA cable with a ground wire for $13 on Amazon. Seems to be intended for car audio, but is it okay to use that with his turntable? He doesn't want to risk turntable and Onkyo receiver. He doesn't want to risk doing any sort of damage, and he doesn't want to introduce an awful hiss or hum or anything. He's paying $120. If paying $120 is truly his only option, he'll do it if he has to, but he'd rather spend less if possible. And what did we say? Well, okay, I haven't looked at any of this, but the ground cable
is nothing.
Doesn't have to be part of the other cables.
Right,
the ground cable is just, a raw wire. A lot of the times, it's usually just some copper wire that they found or lying around. They're like, this won't work. So you can get RCA cables,
right,
and then get another cable to use as the ground cable separately, and just do that. That's what I would do.
Yeah, this one that he found, the $13 one, I mean, functionally, it should be fine, as in sound is going to work. I mean, you can connect a turntable to an AV receiver without the ground wire. The chances of that actually being a problem are really, really low these days, because the notion that you have to ground those two devices together, I mean, that's going way back to when, phono was really popular. I'm not talking about the quote-unquote resurgence of phono these days. I'm talking about when it was the format. And, back then, everybody's houses, the grounding in the house either didn't exist or it was the plumbing pipes. And it was really, really common to have ground loop issues. And it was really, really problem to have hums and hisses and all that type of stuff. So I mean, the chances that you actually need that ground wire connection are really, really low these days to begin with. I'd be more worried about having an RCA cable that is actually a coax cable, because a ton of the cables that are sold as phono cables are a twisted pair, because back in the day, that's what they were. That's worse for signal integrity, though. It should be a coaxial cable that actually has a shield. The phono signal is a really, really low power signal. It is susceptible to picking up interference, and just using a twisted pair of cables in there with no actual shield is the worst way to do things. But there are quote-unquote traditionalists who are like, back when turntables were the audio format, we all used twisted pair cables. That's what I'm still going to use now. And they like the hum that gets picked up, I guess. So it's not hard to get very inexpensive but very, very good coaxial RCA cables. You could go to Monoprice, get a 15-foot length for about $15 with their premium RCA cable, and that's likely all you really need. Yeah, functionally, the one that you mentioned is going to be fine. The only thing is it doesn't appear that its ground cable that it comes with has like the regular spade connector. So you might need to do a little modification there just to actually get the cable wound around that ground pin. But if you're less just like, I've got to have that ground pin, I agree with Tom, you could get one separately. Blue Jeans Cable will sell you a 15-foot grounding wire for $12, which is a little overpriced as it is. But if you just want one that looks really nice and is guaranteed to work, then that could be a way to do it. Blue Jeans owns phono cables, like at the 15-foot length, are like $135, so I'm not going to recommend that you do that. It's totally unnecessary. So just get a good RCA stereo cable. I'd probably just try that all on its own first. The chances you actually need the ground wire are really, really low. If you need one, you can order it from Blue Jeans.
There you go. From Anonymous. Anonymous has an Epson 5050UB projector, and they're using a 4K streaming stick that runs on Google TV. That streaming stick is plugged into his AV receiver, or their AV receiver. I don't know if it's him or her.
Yeah.
No particular issues with Google TV interface. It's fine, but Anonymous has some FOMO and some doubts as to whether they're getting the very best audio and video quality possible from every streaming source. We seem to always mention the Apple TV 4K as being the best streaming device, and we're not the only one. So would there be a noticeable upgrade in audio and or video quality?
Unlikely.
Theoretically.
Unlikely, theoretically, but unlikely. Yeah.
It really, why do we care about, one streaming device over the other? It's more about user interface.
Yeah.
And the ability for it to just sort of output whatever is there. But these days we're kind of converging on everything's kind of doing everything pretty okay, as long as you're not worried too much about more esoteric things. I mean, I say esoteric, but we care about them here on this podcast. But most people don't care whether or not they're getting the full 5.1 or Atmos or HDR or what, HDR 10 plus specifically or Atmos specifically. Most people don't care about that stuff. They just care that they're getting something because it's all coming out of a sound bar anyways. What they really care about is UI. They really care about is, how many ads they have to see or how hard it is to navigate through things. How easy is it to set up?
And especially Apple TV is there a delay when I click the button on the remote versus when it responds? When I click OK, does the app launch immediately, or am I waiting a second? Did it actually register that I clicked OK? Or, oh, there it went. It's that type of usability thing. And the Apple TV 4K is good at that. A really snappy, smooth interface. No ads on the interface itself. So
no ads on the interface itself, I think, is the big one. I've used Apple TV 4K for a while now, on and off, with the off being when I didn't have a house. But now that I've got everything set back up in here, I still every once in a while I'll press button, especially in the YouTube app, I'll press buttons and it's no.
Well,
and I have to back out and come back into it to make it work. To that specific app. Is that between Google and Apple? Probably. Right, yeah. Is somebody doing it on purpose? Probably. But I have no evidence of that because it works fine with every other app pretty much.
Yeah.
But then again, I go into Peacock and I'm watching a show and I back out of that show on accident, or we go to watch something else for a little bit and then we go back to the show and it's no, you were never watching this show.
Right. And that's not an Apple TV 4K fault.
But that's not an Apple TV 4K thing, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's not like we're saying the Apple TV is the perfect box. We're saying that of the boxes, it's the one that we like.
Right, yeah. So this is the thing, from app to app, from service to service, unfortunately, there is no single streaming box we can point to that is universally the best for all of them. That the Apple TV 4K is not that answer. YouTube, it is not the best streaming box for YouTube. Amazon Prime Video, it is not the very best box for that because Apple and Amazon seem to clash, and there's actual objective evidence that the bit rate coming through on the Apple TV 4K for Amazon Prime Video is not the maximum bit rate that Amazon Prime Video is capable of sending out. And that seems to be sort of artificially limited on the Apple TV 4K. So if you want the absolute every possible bit you can get from every possible streaming service, you are going to end up with more than one streaming box is unfortunately the answer there. But yeah, we tend to if you're going to just pick one, we tend to lean towards the Apple TV 4K for the user interface. I pick it because it is definitely the best at automatically detecting the frame rate of whatever you're watching and automatically switching to that matching frame rate output. But even there, it is not universal. I think it's Peacock, their app doesn't use Apple's own video player so the frame rate detection doesn't work on that service. If it's not Peacock, I apologize, but it's one of those services where they refuse to use Apple's own video player, so the frame rate matching doesn't work on that one app. Works great for almost every other one. So if you're a hardcore Plex user, the NVIDIA Shield remains the best choice specifically for Plex. The Apple TV 4K is not the best choice for Plex. It's not a terrible choice, but it's not the best choice. So yeah, there's no literal one size fits all. If you've got a good working Google TV streaming box, the chances that you switch to an Apple TV 4K and just the video and audio of whatever you're playing are like noticeably different, that's almost not ever going to happen.
And you're not being specific about which streaming.
That's right. Not everybody subscribes to every streaming service.
Yeah.
And Netflix looks great on all of them because they do
that's
that.
Right. Yeah. So, we have run into times when we're like, well, if you're using this streaming service like YouTube and you want to get this audio or this video codec, there's only these devices. And it's like LG's built-in apps will do
that's
it.
YouTube
also,
I don't know if there is, like, even Google's own Chromecast with Google TV wasn't the best choice for YouTube. It was like they exclusively had the very best that YouTube can possibly look on, like the built-in TV apps, and no external box got it. It was really weird.
Yeah. So, if you're specific about what you watch, if you're thinking, I want to make sure I have the best for what I watch. It's once again, just like shopping for receivers, you make a list of the features you want and the things you care about, and then find the receiver that does all those things. Mm-hmm. And then don't worry about the other things that it does because you don't care about them. It's the same thing with the streaming box. So, like, I really care about, streaming Amazon Music and getting the best Amazon Music. Well, then Apple TV 4K is not for you. It's not going to be for you. Stefan, does Kaleidoscape work in Barbados? Can you access the Kaleidoscape store from there to buy more movies? Number one, and this is a two-part question for his first question. And would we feel comfortable buying a secondhand unit? Can you buy a secondhand unit? I kind of feel like Kaleidoscape is the kind of product that once you sign into it, it's like it has to be yours or forever or something.
Oh no,
like
there
that.
are
Kinda
secondhand
like the multi-QX is.
There are secondhand units available, and they even have like kind of their own user forum where people list them. Yeah,
well, then there you go.
So,
I'm always comfortable buying secondhand, but that's just me.
Yeah, I'd be quite comfortable with it, especially if it is, authorized dealer or directly from their own user forum where they do that. Yeah, I'd be pretty comfortable, especially if it's any of the ones that use a solid state drive. Because, if anything is going to go wrong, it's going to be a spinning hard drive. And if it's a solid state drive unit, then I'd be comfortable with that. Now, according to like the AI generated answers and everything, the Kaleidoscape store works in Barbados, but I do not feel comfortable giving any sort of guarantee on that because I do not know for sure. So that is a question to write to Kaleidoscape and ask them directly because they do respond. They are responsive to customer inquiries and that. So that's one to ask them directly. It's easy to do so. They got a contact information sheet right on their kaleidoscape.com website. So that'd be one for a question for that. AI thinks it does work. I am not confident that AI is correct. I also don't know that it's wrong though. It might.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of like market this for yachts.
Well,
I don't see why.
You can buy it preloaded. You can definitely get a Kaleidoscape in Barbados that is preloaded with movies. That is 100% sure. But accessing the store and downloading more movies, I'm not 100% sure either way. So ask Kaleidoscape directly. Yeah.
So his second question, Anthony Grimaldi appeared on a different...
I don't know where the L comes from when you say that. It's Grimani.
Grimani, whatever.
There's no L and D.
I put an L and a D.
You put an L and a D into his name. Yep.
I don't know. The coffee either kicks in or kicks off.
Yeah.
At some point in the podcast, and I lose my ability to read. Also, my glasses I decided were dirty at the very beginning of this podcast, and the last time I tried to clean them during the podcast, it made it worse. So I'm sitting here looking through smudges and being distracted the whole time. So I'm not making excuses. I'm terrible at this, but I don't know what else to do. Anthony Grimani appeared on a few different podcasts and YouTube channels over the past couple of weeks, and Stefan wanted to ask us about some of the things he said and the topics that were discussed. Anthony was often pressed for time, so he was talking rather quickly, skipping past several of his PowerPoint slides, and wasn't really able to deep dive just due to time constraints, so Stefan was hoping we might be able to expand a bit on things a little bit. One of the topics was RT60 decay times. Anthony provided a formula at one point to give a very specific RT60 time to aim for based on your room's dimensions and the total volume, but he also summarized by saying that, in general, you want to aim for 200 to 400 milliseconds across the entire audible frequency range. The closer to completely even, the better. But he also showed a chart and described that it's okay if your RT60 times are longer in the bass region and shorter in the treble region. So could we discuss all that? You know why it's okay? Because you ain't got a choice, basically.
Most of the time you really don't. Yeah.
It's, the RT60 is the decay times. It's how long the sound takes to get to a certain level, and how quickly it gets there. So
60 decibels quieter than the initial impulse. So this is like a balloon pop, gunshot, sharp clap of the hand. That's the initial impulse. And it's how long does it take for that sound as it's reverberating around the room to become 60 decibels quieter than the initial impulse. So one of the things he was pointing out is that as the room gets larger and larger, you typically just expect the decay time to get longer and longer. That's just normal. That's just natural. Yeah. Think of any much, much larger auditorium versus your spare bedroom, and the auditorium might literally echo while your spare bedroom doesn't. Even neither of them is acoustically treated, but just you can tell that the reverberation time in a much larger room is naturally longer. That formula that he put up there is just saying that, in a 100 meter cubed type of room, so that, that'd be 10 meters by 10 meters would be squares, or whatever. I can't quite do the math off the top of my head, but in that size of a room, which is not gigantic, that's like a 17 by 23 by 9 type of foot room. It's, a nicely sized home theater, but it's not like insanely large. Then the ideal is like a 300 millisecond decay time, ideally uniform across the entire audible frequency range. But this is the important thing that, I thought Anthony did a perfectly fine job of stating it, but it's something that we like to stress, which is that in the real world, we expect the decay times in the bass to just naturally be a bit longer than the decay times in the mid-range, and we naturally expect the decay times in the high treble to be a bit shorter than the decay times in the mid-range. And Anthony agrees and says that's okay. Because there are people who stress about it, right? When you talk about ideals, quote-unquote ideals, there are people who stress about that and worry that their decay time at 100 hertz is 450 milliseconds, while their decay time at 1 kilohertz is 300 milliseconds, and then their decay time up at 10 kilohertz is 200 milliseconds, and they're screaming and pulling their hair out and worrying that they've done something quote-unquote wrong. And Anthony was pointing out, that is all well within tolerance. It is to be expected. It is natural and normal, and you are not doing anything wrong if your decay times are not literally the same across the entire audible frequency range.
The sound is bouncing around the entire room, all the sounds. It's not like you can just target one sound or one set of frequencies and say, we're going to reduce your decay times. You kind of reduce the decay times of the entire room, and you can, try to keep some of the treble in the room because, it just has less energy. Yeah. It has less energy, which is why when you're
it's more directional. The high frequencies are more directional. They're more easily disrupted. When they bump into things, they get reflected or they scatter, whereas the bass sound waves just wrap right around things and keep on going and barely lose any energy at all.
So, it's just a lot harder. You think about when you're in a big open space and across a lake and you can hear people talking on the other side. You're not hearing the high frequencies, you're hearing the lower frequencies. They just travel really well. And that happens here as well.
The notion that you we're talking about building a theater and using it as a theater, and not necessarily like built from the ground up, 100% dedicated. It could be a shared space, but the idea is this is a theater meant to be listened to, and to get your overall decay times under half a second, under 500 milliseconds, because it's really, really easy, especially in modern architecture where there are a lot of hard reflective surfaces, that, even though you got all your furniture in there, you put a rug down on your hardwood floor, but you measure and your decay times are still well above half a second. That is really easy to happen. So he's just pointing out that, okay, if this is actually a theater, then getting all those decay times under half a second, that's sort of our goal here. There is a supposed ideal, but don't beat yourself up if it's not literally a flat line across all RT60.
Yeah. Anthony also gave his recommendations on speaker placement, and his recommended positions did not seem to perfectly line up with Dolby's speaker placement guidelines, as neither do ours, really.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Yeah. They would not be out of spec. His recommendation went out of spec. They're just not the same as what Dolby says is optimal. Yeah. Anthony was saying that in a professional dubbing stage or a theater used for mastering cinema releases, they use an acoustically transparent screen that fills 50-degree field of view. Makes total sense. The front three speakers are all positioned behind the screen, and the screen being that wide, the front, left, and right speakers go just on the outside edges of the screen. Inside edges, of the screen, and the tweeters create a 45-degree angle between them, or plus or minus 22.5 degrees. Mm-hmm. He said that for home theater, he'd recommend sticking with that 45-degree angle between the front, left, and right speakers, or as close as possible, not the 60-degree spread that is often recommended, but also not narrower. So in a lot of cases, he'd actually be putting the front, left, and right speakers on the outside edges of a display. Any thoughts on that?
I 100% agree.
Yeah. I recommend looking at your couch and then deciding where to put your speakers more often than people who look at their TV and are like, I have to put things based on where my TV is. Because how many TVs do you see are just way too small for the field of view that you really should be going for? And then people flank their TVs directly, as close as possible with their speakers.
Just to the side edges of the TV. Yeah.
And you look at them, you're like, this is mono. This is mono. You are sitting so far away. This is a mono. Yes, technically, if you're dead center, you'll get some stereo separation, but not much. This is a mono experience. So I don't look at those angles at all. But my recommendations, if you are placing your couch at the right distance from your screen, and your screen is the right size, you will be getting around you will be within Dolby's recommendations. You'll be within Anthony's recommendations. You'll be within my recommendations. Yep. Most of the time.
Yeah, we are all very much in agreement with Anthony on that one.
I scrolled back up, so I have to scroll down. So for the surrounds, which Anthony said he prefers to call sides, just for clarity, that's fine. I think that's fine. He said he prefers to position them a little behind the main row of seats, closer to plus or minus 110 degrees rather than the 90 degrees. He also said to put them about 6 feet off the floor, basically 1.5 to 2 feet above our heads when sitting down. What are our thoughts on that positioning? Did he steal it from us? Because that's what we say.
That's exactly
We've been saying
what we
it.
say.
We've never not said it.
Little behind.
I've always thought
elevated.
putting your sides or your surrounds or whatever you're going to call them directly to your sides was dumb. I always thought they should be a little bit behind and a little bit up. We've been saying it. We've never not said it. We've never not said it.
We've always said we want a clear line of sight, right? Like if you put it literally 90 degrees and you've got a 3-seater couch and you actually have someone sitting on either side of you and you're in the middle seat, then if that was at 90 degrees and bang at ear level, like it's shown in some of the Dolby diagrams and even in the Dolby description, then that sound is firing right into somebody's left ear, right into somebody's right ear, and it is occluded from reaching you in the center. We're like, no, move it back a little bit, move it up a little bit, and now everyone has a clear line of sight to at least the tweeters of all the speakers. And everyone gets a more uniform experience, and Anthony was exactly agreeing with that, and we completely agree with him.
Yeah. So I think we should deserve some sort of credit, though. It was brought up how if your surrounds are elevated, you might not get very good separation between those and your overhead speakers, but Anthony's response was that ideally your overhead speakers really are ceiling mounted or in ceiling speakers, not just mounted high up on your wall. So you should get a real sense they're almost directly above you, while the side speakers are definitely to your sides. Elevated, yes, but distinctly to your sides and a little behind, while the overhead speakers are really above and not merely elevated. Not only that, but there is a I think that if you're going to do like elevation speakers, which we talk about a lot on this podcast, those would be preferably 90 degrees. They should be directly to your side. So these are elevated, but also in front of your side surrounds, which would be a little bit less elevated.
If we're saying that as top middles.
Top middles. That's if you're doing top middles. If you're doing front heights and rear heights, or top fronts and top rears, or whatever they're calling them these days, then those are not even close. Not even close.
Yeah.
So that becomes less of an issue. But I don't think that this, even if you're doing the side surrounds, the top middles, and you're doing them as elevation speakers that are in the corners or right there, I think they're separated enough from each other for you to get that idea of what they are, that they are in a different position. So I don't agree with that.
So far, we've been completely in agreement with Anthony on everything he said there, which, like we have pointed out ourselves, not literally what the Dolby diagrams, if you're just looking at them, show you. So that's fair enough. But as far as if you don't believe what we've been saying about it, then we're going to say, okay, Anthony makes way more money than Tom and Rob does. He's been doing this for 40 years. He holds patents for like actual cinema design. So if you want to take all of his credentials and go, but that actually sounds a lot like what Tom and Rob have said, we're like, well, not completely an accident.
It's important to understand that some people and organizations distinguish themselves by saying something is absolute truth when it is absolutely not. Like, for the Dolby guidelines, they have to say this is the optimal placement based on what, blah, blah, blah. What they're not telling you with this optimal placement is that it is meant for a single person.
And in a way, they indicate that because their diagrams always show one lone listener sitting on either a single chair.
But they always show a 3-seater couch.
But nobody's sitting in those other seats.
So, they have, because someone is going to say, but what is the best placement?
Right.
And they can't, because they are who they are, they can't waffle. They can't say, well, it kind of depends on your room, and it kind of depends on your couch, and it kind of depends on the materials that your couch are made, how high the backs are of the couch, and how, they can't say all that. They have to say, this is where it is. You are sitting on a folding, wooden chair. Yeah. With no back,
seat back.
Very little back. And a stool in the middle of this thing,
right? And
there's, no doors, this is a perfect rectangle. There's no way to get in and out of this place. They have locked you. They've built the room around you, and this is where you should place your speakers. And they're not wrong. Just maybe not as helpful as you think it is. He also said he'd have the surround back speakers, which again he prefers to call rear speakers, elevated at the same height as the sides, about 2 feet above your head. He also made some interesting suggestions due to experience, having developed the patent for when surround back speakers were first introduced in cinemas with Dolby Digital EX and eventually discrete 7.1. He said that even though speakers are truly behind you, typically mounted directly onto the back wall, the way our human hearing system works, when you're facing straight forward, it can be difficult to pinpoint where these sounds are coming from, and it can even seem as though they're actually coming from in front of you sometimes, unless you turn your head a little bit. Boy, that doesn't sound like something I've ever said. Well, wait.
Yeah,
I think I've said it almost all the frickin' time. So his findings were that rear speakers work better if they're closer together than your front left and right speakers, maybe only 4 feet apart or so, with about a 30-degree spread at most, and then it can be helpful to actually have your pair of surround back speakers at slightly different heights from each other. He used the term binaural dissimilarity, which will come up again later. So that was a different recommendation from what is usually given out. What do we make of that? Not only is that in line with exactly how I had my theater set up back when I had that at home, except for the
slightly different heights. That actually was new that I hadn't heard before.
I haven't heard of that. But this is how THX
Yep.
did surround for a very long time.
Yep.
Their recommendations were that you put your two speakers very close, your two back speakers
actually even
very
closer
close
than
to
that,
each other. And that's how my speakers were, because that's how my room was laid out, and I had no other place to put them. You know, I couldn't separate them as much. Like the Atmos has them in line with your front speakers, you know, it's in your overhead speakers, like one big line, which makes sense from the standpoint of
having an arc that starts at the front and goes up and over and goes to the back.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. But like he said, your hearing is just not that sensitive behind you. So it really 6.1 makes as much sense to me as 7.1.
Although that can have the effect of like the center rear sounds like it's coming from in front of you sometimes. That can happen. Which
is often why we would recommend in a home theater that had a projection screen or a TV that was lower to put some absorption on that front wall where that rear speaker or those rear speakers would hit in order to absorb that first reflection, because that is their, well, it's not technically, but one of their direct reflections in order to combat that. Because in 6.1, that was a big problem. We often found people saying, my rear speaker sounds like it's coming from the front. It never sounds like it's coming from the back. And it's because of the delay. So as the reflection happens, you're still getting as much, especially if it's hitting like a TV or a really hard wall, the reflection would come back and it would be delayed enough that your brain would have to decide, I need to know which, these volumes are so similar. One of these is not right, and I can't figure out which, so I need to pick. And because of the volumes being the same or almost the same, your brain's like, the most recent one, it must be the right one, not the earlier one. That one must be the wrong one. And therefore, your brain is also like, nope, it's coming from the front. And no matter what you do to the speaker, it didn't really change because you're still getting that reflection. So we would have to angle it off to the side, or we would have to put some absorption, or maybe aim it up at the ceiling so that it bounces and hits in a slightly different way. And a lot of people just got rid of the rear speaker because of that, because they're like, I can't fix it. It just always sounds that way to me. So yeah, this is pretty typical. And these are, other than having different heights, which like Rob, I've never really heard of that before. This all lines up with stuff that we've not only done, in my case, I've done it, but have experienced and have suggested in the past. I would say that I don't like the suggestion because he based on how this is written, a hard and fast rule that you have at the same height as your surround speakers or your side speakers, because I think oftentimes your surround backs, because they're competing with the height of your of the back of your seats,
seat back,
can mean that it has to go even a little bit higher. In order to get that clear line of sight to your ear.
Hard and fast rule. He was just mentioning that like surround backs also elevated, not literal ear level, which the Dolby fans are saying. Yeah,
which is Dolby still thinks, because they think that nobody wants to be comfortable in their theater. They just want to sit there. Yeah.
If I had surround back speakers, I'd be willing to experiment and try that like slightly different heights. Or actually, one thing, like if you hate that look, like if you've got typical speakers with a woofer and a tweeter, like turn one of them upside down.
Turn one upside down. That's right. It would make a difference. It would make a difference in height. Yeah. And nobody has to know. Just as long as they're actual rectangles, you can just turn the grill over as well.
Wouldn't work with caps.
The logo's on the bottom. Or the top, however yours says. On a big topic of room treatments, we just mentioned that binaural dissimilarity term. Anthony used that again when describing his recommended room treatments plan. He has advocated for having your sidewall treatments be slightly asymmetrical, and he usually shows alternating absorption and diffusion panels, all at least 4 inches thick. But if there's a diffusion panel on the left wall, the directly opposite on the right wall would be an absorption panel. And then on the next panel over, on the left wall would be absorption, while directly opposite on the right wall would now be diffusion, and back and forth and so on. He said to aim for 15% of your room's surface area to be covered in absorption only, and another 10 to 15% covered in diffusion. Not necessarily diffusion only, they could be combo panels. His reasoning for this asymmetrical layout is that if the sidewall reflections are are all identical, our brains tend to blend those in with the direct sounds. But if the sidewall reflections are dissimilar from each other, left versus right, then our brains have an easier time identifying them as being reflections, not direct sounds, and we're pretty good at filtering those out of our perception. So any thoughts from us on all of that? I will, until somebody can show me definitively, and I experience probably, to be honest with you, until I experience the diffusion making a real impact in a home theater that is positive and not just sort of like, well, it looks nice, I will continue to not recommend diffusion as being part of most home theaters, and it is because of their size. Okay. They're just not big enough.
To actually be effective, they have to be, honestly, they have to be deeper than 4 inches. That is still only getting down to maybe 1 kilohertz if you're lucky, more like 1.5, 2 kilohertz, even at 4 inches deep.
Anthony is working with higher end clients who have, potentially much larger rooms, that where diffusion can make I think an impact that is just not going to be seen in the rooms that we are dealing with here, where we're dealing with 17 feet wide, 20 something feet deep, and 8 feet tall rooms. These are just not rooms that need diffusion.
That's like the smallest he might deal with, and typically larger than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I'm more pragmatic when it comes to things. And from my perspective, it's so hard to get absorption on the wall to then tell people that you have to make it asymmetrical is just like, that's just not going to happen. They're just not going to do it. And it's going to stop them not only from doing the thing that you want them to do, which is place absorption asymmetrically, but also stop them from placing absorption at all.
Right.
Because it was already a hard sell for their family to have to deal with them trying to put all these acoustic panels all over this space. But then to say, and it also has to look a little weird. You're also going to have to answer questions for why people are going to walk in the room and say, how come it's different on that wall than this wall? Right. How come they're not the same?
Yeah, if they notice, if it's not all fabric covered, because then if it's all fabric covered, it can look uniform, and then behind the fabric is something hidden. This is the only one where I maybe I'm not going to say disagree, but have a slight difference of opinion here. Now, one of the things that I've been sort of neglectful of not really having mentioned all that much is, so I've talked about how you can basically never have too much bass trapping, and therefore you might, if the budget and the space allows, cover quite a good portion of your room in thick absorption. And if you do that, and then you also have a fully carpeted room, and you have plush furniture, and you have any windows covered in thick plush drapes, like, you could quite realistically end up with it sounding pretty dead in the treble. And that's where I would recommend combo panels. I wouldn't necessarily recommend diffusion only, because it has to be prohibitively thick, and diffusion panels look the way they look. But I might recommend more combo panels because, as I've mentioned, combo panels diffusion, it does still weaken the treble, but not quite as much as pure absorption only. So if you have other things in the room that are really only affecting high frequencies like wall-to-wall carpeting and plush furniture and drapes, then that's where having something covering the front portion of your absorption to reflect a little bit more energy than absorption by itself, that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the rooms that Anthony's dealing with are into that type of situation. They're heavily treated and could start sounding pretty dead in the treble if you just did absorption only. So I have remained a fan of combo panels where they make sense. But yeah, the asymmetrical, it's easy enough to have your scatter plates both facing back, and that would be asymmetrically dissimilar on your sidewalls at the first reflection points, while looking symmetrical because they're mirrored visually, but acoustically they are now facing the opposite directions. So that might be the way I would come at that from a visual standpoint.
So the whole thing culminated with Anthony giving his recommendation for what the target curve ought to be when using a so-called room correction system such as Dirac ART or Odyssey. But he talked about how there are many variables, so there's truly not a literal single target in every room. ought to aim for. And all of that was having addressed your specific speakers, their replacement, the acoustic treatments, and your decay times. Also, the way omnidirectional measurement microphone hears test tones is not the same as our human ear, so the target curve needs to be something that makes sense for the microphone, but then translates well to our human hearing. So ultimately, he mentioned the Harman speaker target curve, which is essentially a flat horizontal line across the mid-range with a rise in the bass below 150 hertz and a roll-off in the treble above 6 kilohertz. And if you were to simplify it to just a sloped line, it would basically be a downward slope if you started at 18 hertz on the left and the slope downwards to towards 20 kilohertz on the right at a rate about 1 dB per octave. And there's some screenshots. Yeah. But he stressed that with different room sizes, with different speakers that have different dispersion patterns, with different room treatments, with different decay times, the precise shape of the EQ target curve is going to be slightly different from setup to setup. So he ultimately relies on tuning it by ear. Oh my. Using a pair of reference for him, endemonic earphones that he's super familiar with. And comparing the sound from the earphones to the in-room sound, and he makes slight tweaks, maybe a little more or less bass, maybe a little more or less treble roll-off until the in-room sound closely matches the tonal sound in those in-ear headphones. No one-size-fits-all, which is what the audience was hoping for, but they didn't get it from Anthony. So what do we make of that? It sounds like job security from where I sit. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree. I just don't. I think that the target curve is more about the person listening than the system itself. Okay, what you set the target curve, like the speakers, what in and out, the speakers in the room, like as you measure with your microphone. And yes, he's right. We hear differently than the microphone. Mm-hmm. I'm not debating that or saying that that's not correct. The system at the seat should be, you should measure what comes into the microphone, and it should be what came out of, what was the source was trying to play. Mm-hmm. The source said, play this, and then you measured it at the seat. Boom. That's the target curve. Okay. That's the target curve for the system. Okay. But that is not what the person necessarily will find as being the target curve that's correct for them. Yeah. So that's what he's saying here. He's saying, I'm looking for the target curve as I know it to be, and I know what's supposed to sound good, and that's why you're paying me a bunch of money to do all this stuff, because I can sell this stuff up for you, and then I can set your target curve to be perfect. And my ears are the perfect ones. But, it's just like, if you've been to a concert, if you've worked in a loud environment, you have hearing loss. Sure. And if you're of a certain age, you have hearing loss whether or not you've done those things or you've done them a lot. I'm fortunate in that I am cheap, and I didn't like to go to concerts when I was young. So now people are like, do you want to go to this concert? I'm like, how much does it cost? Oh, it's $30. Right. So that's not bad. But there's a $30 convenience fee for buying the ticket online. I'm like, I'm out, not going. And so therefore my hearing hasn't been damaged in that way. I also haven't worked a lot in loud environments. And when I have, I've always worn ear protection because it was required in those environments. And therefore I don't have a lot of hearing loss based on that. But I still do have hearing loss. Sure. And that means that what I want. Yeah. What I want to hear and what I think is pleasurable, what I think makes sense, is not the same as what my wife or my kids think. It's not the same as what Anthony thinks, and it's not the same as what any of you think. Some things I'm going to prefer over other things, and sometimes it's a hearing loss thing, sometimes it's just a preference, and it's okay to say that, hey, I want to goose these frequencies because to me, it just sounds like it's not as lively in here as it should be. Mm-hmm. To me, it just doesn't sound like it kicks me in the chest enough. To me, I'm not feeling this bass, or I want, when there's an explosion, I want this place to roll. Right. And I want to hear it loud, and I want it to be physically louder. If that screws up James Earl Jones's voice when he's talking as Darth Vader, well, then it does. But to me, that's okay. That's okay. I like the way that sounds. And that's a target curve.
Yeah, I had a slightly different take. I see where Tom is coming from now that he explained it, but I had a slightly different take in that. So not that Anthony doesn't know this, it's just something that wasn't said for the sake of time, because it just didn't happen to come up. But that Harman speaker target curve, we've mentioned it before. It is a descriptive curve, not a prescriptive curve that they came up with, which, if you parse out everything that Anthony did say in his limited amount of time, he was advocating for the same design of speaker that Dr. Floyd Toole has advocated for, which is very, very flat on-axis frequency response, and then off-axis frequency response that does not vary too much from that on-axis frequency response, that there is a naturally expected slight high-frequency roll-off as you go farther and farther away off-axis, but that it is very smooth off-axis roll-off, and that it is really quite even wide dispersion. And so he was pointing out, not all speakers are designed that way. And that doesn't mean they are, like, objectively bad speakers, but it does mean that when you measure speakers that have a dispersion pattern that's different from a Dr. Floyd Toole designed speaker, which is a speaker design that Anthony himself ascribes to, and therefore the speakers he sells have that wide, even dispersion. They've been designed that way. But if you're using speakers that aren't designed that way, then it isn't going to make, like, objective or subjective sense to use the very same target curve regardless of what speakers you're using. That's where he was saying that there are all these variables of, if your speakers have different dispersion, if you completely don't treat your acoustic space, because some people are putting it in their marble living room and they refuse to put any acoustic treatments in there, or you're in a really heavily padded room and that's just what you prefer, like, your EQ target curve is not going to be literally identical one for one in all of those scenarios. So, the audience of the podcast was like, what should my target curve be? Like, just give me an answer. Is Odyssey's default target curve right or wrong? Is Dirac's default target curve right or wrong? Am I supposed to be manually changing it to something else? And if so, what is it? Like, they wanted just give me the one-size-fits-all answer. And Anthony was saying, like, there isn't a one-size-fits-all, because not everybody's using the exact same speakers in the exact same room with the exact same acoustic treatments. And that part, I completely agree with him on that there's going to be some differences in the ultimate target curve.
So think about it this way, and I completely agree with everything Rob just said. Okay. If you are... We talked about Atlantic Technology speakers last week, or the week before, I think maybe both, where they have very wide dispersion. You don't ever have to tow them in. You just put them at the front of your room, and they just, no matter where you're sitting, they're fine. Because they have such even wide dispersion. How that is measured by the microphone at the seat is going to be similar to how an electrostatic speaker, which has almost no dispersion and is pointed directly at the microphone, is going to measure. And the target curve that you might have or how Odyssey or Dirac or Turnoff sets everything up might be very similar. But to the person who's sitting next to the person where the microphone was set, they're going to have a very different experience. And so when your target curve suddenly must change.
Yeah, when you do a multi-position microphone measurement, which you're not doing as a single listener, you're not typically sliding back and forth across your 3-seater couch and getting that experience, but your microphone measured in multiple positions, at least in the good room correction ones. And it's like, oh, so they're going to pick that up. With the electrostatic speaker, the measurement in the left seat and the right seat is different, notably different from the measurement in the center seat. What am I targeting here? Is that the same as a speaker that has this wide even dispersion and all three of those seats get really similar response? And Anthony's saying, no, not quite. Like, he wasn't saying they're going to be miles apart. He starts with that Harman target curve, but then makes adjustments from there based on the speakers that are actually being used and the room that we're actually in and where the seating actually is located, because some people have their seats against the back wall, and that's going to be a different target curve than the people who have their seats in the center versus ones that are 1/3 back or 2/3 back. Like, there's going to be some adjustments, not worlds and worlds apart. You're probably going to end up with something where if you simplified it, it's going to be a slightly sloped line where it's a little bit higher in the deep bass and a little bit lower in the high treble, and a pretty, like, not a super steep slope, 1 decibel per octave. Like, that's kind of the starting point, but that it's okay to tune it and tweak it from there, because rooms are different and speakers are different and placement is different.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Well, that's all the questions.
It is. We went way longer than I thought we were going to, but hey, the questions are all answered.
I did not realize we were going so long because, believe me, I would have stopped because I've got things to do today. But that's fine. My
Can't take
kids
it
are
back
out of
now.
school. Yeah, my kids are out of school, and I don't have physical therapy for another hour and a half.
Okay.
So we let it go. So we are all caught up. Get your questions in to ask your questions, to have us answer them. Email them to question@avrant.com.
Mm-hmm.
We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Ray for going to our website and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, as well as our 132 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you to Ray for the PayPal donation and our 132 patrons for continuing to support us every month.
That is right, Ray. Thanks so much for the PayPal, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 132 patrons over there.
I want to thank Bertrand for, I guess Bertrand should be thanking us to let him know that he has to move to America if he wants to use his movie code, but it does work in America. So there you go.
Thank you, Bertrand, for sending in that code.
And we wanted to thank those who sent in notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, from Joe Klesnick, Jefferson, Bertrand, and John. Thank you for thanking us.
I'll say the names one more time. We got Joe, Jefferson, Bertrand, and John. Thank you very much for the notes of encouragement and gratitude. We really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.